Have you ever, um, have you ever lost a sure thing deal at the absolute last minute, and to this day you just have no idea why it fell through?
Oh, that is the worst.
Right. I mean, you had the verbal yes, you had the handshakes, the smiles over those, expensive dinners.
Huh.
You practically spent the commission in your head.
Yeah, you already factored it into the quarterly projection.
Exactly. And then out of nowhere, you get completely ghosted.
Hmm.
Or you get hit with one of those sudden, inexplicably vague emails like, we decided to go in another direction.
Ugh, brutal.
It is maddening, completely maddening.
It really is. I mean, that feeling is universally devastating for anyone in professional services or, well, business development of any kind. You're just left standing there holding the pieces of this shattered contract,
Wondering if it was something you said.
right? Or if your product failed some secret test, or if the universe just, decided to target you specifically that day.
Yeah, and the worst part is the autopsy afterwards.
Oh, yeah. You replay every single conversation. You scrutinize every email thread trying to find the exact moment the deal died, and you come up completely empty-handed.
Well, today that mystery ends. Because in this deep dive, we are going to reveal exactly why those inexplicable losses happen and, more importantly, how to make sure they never, ever happen to you again.
I love that.
We are unpacking Chapter 1, which is titled Successful Selling in a World of Constant Change, from this foundational business text, The New Strategic Selling. And our mission here is really specific. We are extracting the absolute most critical insights from this material to give you a shortcut.
A masterclass shortcut, really.
Exactly. We want to make you an architect of your own success in these complex professional environments.
Right. And to give a quick overview of what we're actually doing here, we're exploring why relying on traditional face-to-face charm is just a dead end in modern organizations. You'll learn how to identify structural complexity in your deals and why adopting a repeatable, highly analytical strategy is really your only safety line.
And this matters for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Whether you're a startup founder pitching a multinational or a freelancer trying to land a whale of a client, relying on luck or past success is just a guaranteed recipe for failure.
So I want to start exactly where the authors start, because they frame this entire problem using an analogy that completely reframed how I view corporate environments.
The Greek mythology one.
Yes, they go way back to ancient Greek mythology, specifically the story of King Minos' labyrinth, the Minotaur, and the hero Theseus.
It is such a great framing.
It really is. The core argument here is that selling today, or really navigating any large corporate entity, is exactly like walking into that underground maze.
Well, and the brilliance of that specific metaphor is the distinction between a maze and a labyrinth, right?
Because they aren't the same thing.
Exactly. A typical maze is just something you solve. It has dead ends, sure, but it's essentially just a puzzle. A labyrinth, at least in the mythological sense, is designed to actively disorient you.
To strip away your sense of direction.
Yes, and ultimately, to trap you in an environment where a predator lives. Now, in modern business, obviously, the Minotaur isn't a literal monster trying to eat you for lunch.
Though it can feel like it sometimes.
True. But the monster is really the sheer, overwhelming complexity of the organization itself. If you walk into a corporate deal without a strategy, you will figuratively get eaten alive by that complexity.
Just consumed by endless committee meetings and budget freezes.
And internal politics you can't even see.
Right. And that makes the next part of the myth so crucial. Because in the legend, you have the Princess Ariadne, and she gives Theseus this simple ball of thread before he enters the darkness.
The famous thread.
Yeah. And the instruction is just to unwind it as he walks, so that after he slays the monster, he has a tether to follow back out to the daylight. So the authors use that thread as the ultimate symbol for strategy.
Which is perfect, because without that thread, defeating the monster is meaningless. You still die in the dark.
Right.
So translating that to our deep dive today, slaying the monster represents, say, delivering a phenomenal pitch.
Like the best presentation of your life.
Exactly. But without the thread of strategy to guide you through the procurement process and the legal reviews and the hidden executive approval,
You never make it out with a signed contract.
you don't. The strategy tethers you to reality when every hallway in a corporate hierarchy looks identical and every single middle manager acts like they have the final authority to buy.
Okay, let me pause you right there, actually, because I want to push back on the terminology a bit.
Sure, go for it.
The text talks heavily about navigating the, quote, complex sale. And my brain immediately assumes that complex is just business jargon for a really expensive product.
Ah, Yeah, that's a very common assumption.
Right, like if I'm selling a $10 million piece of enterprise software, well, that's complex. If I'm selling a $10 widget, that's simple. Is it just about the price tag?
It is definitively not about the price tag, and the source material is incredibly rigid about this.
Wait, really? It has nothing to do with price.
Nothing. It's not determined by price, and it's not determined by how technologically sophisticated the product is either. It is defined entirely by structure.
Structure, meaning the internal architecture of the company you're selling to.
That is the core of it, yeah. The formal definition the authors give is this. A complex sale is one in which a number of people must give their approval or input before the buying decision is made.
Ah, so it's all about multiple decision makers.
Entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be selling a billion-dollar private jet, but if you're selling it directly to a billionaire who can just write a check on the spot without asking a single person for permission.
Then you're in a simple sale.
Exactly. You are in a simple sale.
Wow. Okay, that reframes things completely. So it's not about the nature of what you're selling, it's about the volume of organizational hoops you have to jump through to get it sold.
Yes, and the book uses a very grounded example to illustrate this, involving something as basic as basketballs.
Right, basketballs. Universally understood, low-ticket items.
They serve as the perfect control variable for this thought experiment.
Let's walk through it. So imagine you go down to the local independent sporting goods store on Main Street. You walk in, you talk to the owner. Let's call him Pop Jones.
Good old Pop Jones.
You show him a catalog of your basketballs. He feels the leather, he likes the grip, looks at the price, and he writes you a check for a dozen right out of his ledger.
And that is the definition of a simple sale.
One person, one presentation, one yes. Deal is closed.
Right. But now, take those exact same basketballs. You haven't changed the product, you haven't changed the price. But this time, instead of the local mom-and-pop shop, you are trying to sell 100 gross of those basketballs to a massive national retail chain like Kmart.
Okay, yeah, the environment completely shifts there.
Yeah.
Suddenly, walking in with a firm handshake and a nice sample isn't going to cut it.
No, because there is no Pop Jones who holds all the power.
Wow.
Instead of one emotional buyer, you are suddenly dealing with this distributed network of authority.
So you're pitching to, like, a regional purchasing agent in Chicago who only cares about volume discounts.
Yep. And then you have to appease an inventory manager in Detroit who only cares about warehouse space.
And delivery logistics, probably.
Exactly. Plus, you might need sign-off from a financial officer in New York to approve the vendor payment terms.
So you're navigating shifting authority, multiple geographic locations, and competing interests, all within the exact same corporation.
Right. And earning one yes is relatively straightforward, assuming your product is good.
Sure.
But in a complex sale, you need a synchronized series of yeses from people who might not even like each other, let alone communicate well with each other.
So if you treat the Kmart sale the way you treated the Pop Jones sale, you're just walking into the labyrinth without Ariadne's thread.
You're dead in the water. You might charm the buyer in Chicago, but if you don't realize the inventory manager in Detroit has veto power over the shipping schedule, the deal dies in the dark.
So you need a strategy that identifies every single person who has a hand on the steering wheel.
Every single one.
So the actionable takeaway for you listening to this right now is to immediately audit the structural complexity of whatever professional goal you're pursuing. Look at your current biggest prospect, or even an internal initiative.
Yeah, internal stuff counts too.
Right. If your goal requires 2 or more yes votes from different individuals to become a reality, you are officially in a complex sale.
You need a structural map, not just a slick slide deck.
And assuming one yes is enough when the structure dictates otherwise, I mean, that has to be the most common cause of getting ghosted, right? Like we talked about at the beginning.
Oh, without a doubt, it is the single most common cause. Which actually leads us perfectly to this fascinating case study from the text. It illustrates the profound danger of what the authors call the locked-in deal.
Ah, yes. The story of Ray and Greg, 2 competing salespeople fighting over a massive contract.
This is perhaps the most classic cautionary tale of corporate business development. So we're looking at a multi-million-dollar computer system up for grabs at a major corporate account.
Okay, let's analyze our 2 players. First, we have Ray.
Right.
Ray is the incumbent. He represents a massive, prestigious company with a huge chunk of the market share, and Ray is supremely confident.
Oh, he is on cloud 9.
Because he personally knows the CEO of the buying company. They play golf at the same country club. Ray feels so utterly convinced this deal is a lock that he's out shopping for a new luxury car using his anticipated commission.
I mean, consider the psychology there. Ray feels completely secure because he has a deep historical relationship at the very top of the food chain.
The ultimate executive, yes.
Exactly. He has it in his pocket. But the trap Ray falls into is a mix of confirmation bias and that intoxicating ego boost of having C-suite access.
It's hard to ignore that ego boost.
It is, and the human brain seeks the path of least resistance. For Ray, asking hard questions about the current procurement process feels unnecessary.
Maybe even slightly insulting to his relationship with the CEO. Like, why are you asking me about procurement, Ray? We golf together.
Exactly, so he just assumes it's handled.
Enter our second player, Greg. Now, Greg works for his smaller, scrappier rival firm, maybe half the market share of Ray's behemoth company.
Greg is the definitive underdog.
Right. He hasn't even been in the same room as the CEO.
Mhm.
The text implies Ray is probably laughing at Greg's efforts. Greg is a nobody to the executive board.
However, Greg possesses a very distinct advantage.
Which is?
He approaches the situation not as a contest of who has the best executive Rolodex, but as a structural puzzle that needs to be actively decoded.
He's looking for Ariadne's thread.
Yes. Before he even thinks about pitching a product, he's searching for the thread.
So instead of trying to force a meeting with the CEO to, rival Ray, Greg starts digging into the actual plumbing of the organization.
He goes looking for the real decision-making structure for this specific purchase.
And in doing so, he uncovers a guy named Jeff. Now, Jeff is an outside technical consultant. Ray, totally blinded by his country club hubris, completely ignored Jeff.
Because Jeff doesn't even technically work for the buying company.
Right. But ignoring him was Ray's fatal foundational error.
It really was. Because as Greg maps the organization, he discovers Jeff used to be a senior member of the buying company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And far more importantly, Greg uncovers the actual mechanism of how this deal will be signed. He learns from Jeff that for this highly specific technical system, the CEO has absolutely no intention of making the final call.
So the CEO delegated it.
Yes. The CEO has delegated the final sign-off authority down to a division general manager.
Meaning Ray's ironclad connection to the CEO, while, fantastic for his golf game, is completely structurally irrelevant to the specific deal on the table.
It is entirely irrelevant. I mean, the CEO might sign the final piece of paper as a formality, but the actual decision is being made floors below him.
And Greg doesn't stop there.
No, he takes the mapping a step further. He analyzes that division general manager and learns that this GM relies heavily on Jeff, the outside consultant, for advice on state-of-the-art technology.
So Greg has essentially drawn the map of the labyrinth.
He has. He realizes the path to the signed contract isn't a straight line to the CEO. The true path routes through Jeff in order to influence the GM.
So Greg focuses all his time and energy on showing Jeff how his solution perfectly matches the technical specs. He doesn't just pitch Jeff, he essentially arms Jeff with the data to make the pitch on his behalf.
Exactly. Jeff takes that information to the general manager. Jeff sells the GM on Greg's system, and Greg successfully steals this massive multi-million-dollar deal right out from under Ray's nose.
And Ray is left standing in the car dealership, completely bewildered.
Sweating bullets, wondering how he managed to lose a sure thing when the CEO is his best friend.
When I first read that, my immediate reaction was to assume Ray was just lazy. Or maybe just wildly arrogant.
Sure, it looks that way on the surface.
But looking closer at the mechanics of the story, I don't think Ray was lazy at all. He was probably putting in long hours, whining and dining, managing his high-level relationships. His flaw was that he was misdirecting his energy based on a flawed premise.
I agree completely. Ray lacked a defined, reliable process for testing his own assumptions. He fell into the incumbent's trap.
Assuming that because the CEO had the authority to say yes in the past, he must be the only yes that matters now.
Exactly. For this specific, new objective, Greg won because he treated the complex sale as a dynamic, living environment. He actively investigated who held the actual practical approval power for the specific deal on the table today, not who held power a year ago.
This highlights such a crucial behavioral shift for anyone listening. You must divorce yourself from the comfort of past successes. You have to treat every new deal, even with existing clients, as a blank slate.
Because the people who hold the power can shift from project to project and from budget cycle to budget cycle.
That is a profound practical takeaway. Never let a historical relationship blind you to current structural realities. Always investigate who holds the actual approval power right now. Because, as the authors heavily emphasize, in modern business, the ground beneath your feet is always shifting.
And that concept of shifting ground isn't just a casual observation. It serves as the absolute foundation of their entire methodology. It introduces a vital premise that dictates how we have to operate.
Yes, the authors state this premise beautifully, and frankly, a bit brutally. They write, "Whatever got you where you are today is no longer sufficient to keep you there."
It's a sobering thought, especially for anyone who feels they've finally found a comfortable rhythm or a safe zone in their career.
Right. But they lean heavily into this concept of future shock in the corporate environment. We aren't dealing with occasional seasonal changes anymore.
No, we're dealing with relentless, continuous disruption.
We see this everywhere. Massive leaps in technology rendering products obsolete overnight, brutal shifts in market share, and most importantly for the complex sale, relentless corporate restructuring.
Oh, the restructuring, the mergers, the private equity buyouts, the downsizing.
The constant executive musical chairs.
Exactly. The stability of yesterday is a complete illusion. I mean, the people you spent 2 years building a relationship with yesterday might not even have a job tomorrow, or their entire department might be outsourced to a different continent.
So if you're relying on a time-tested playbook just because it generated revenue for you in the past, you are operating on borrowed time.
You are. And the text uses an incredibly vivid analogy to hammer this home. They suggest that relying on business as usual in a world of constant change is exactly like building elaborate castles in the sand.
Oh, I love this analogy. Think about the psychology of that visual. You're on the beach, you're meticulously building this intricate, beautiful structure. You are completely focused on the micro details.
Shaping the towers, digging the little moat.
Right. But in your hyper-focus on the immediate task, you are completely ignoring the macro environment. You're ignoring the tide.
And you know for an absolute fact that the waves are coming.
Yes. You might not know exactly how high the next wave will be or the exact hour it will wash over your specific stretch of beach, but you know with absolute certainty that the tide is coming in.
So the core argument here is that strategy is about preparation, not prevention. You cannot stop the waves of corporate change.
You can't prevent your biggest client from being acquired by a competitor.
Exactly. Since prevention is impossible, you have to fundamentally change your reaction to the inevitable disruption. And the authors make a really fascinating psychological observation here.
What's that?
They say it is not the change itself that causes us massive anxiety and panic. It is the uncertainty of not knowing how to react to the change.
Oh, wow. I want to dig into that because it feels incredibly true. The anxiety comes from feeling blind.
Yes.
It comes from lacking a reliable internal system to process the new external reality. If you have a flexible strategy designed to navigate change, a sudden reorganization at your biggest client isn't a disaster that ruins your quarter. It's just new data that you plug into your existing process.
Precisely. If your baseline expectation is that the ground will shift, you don't panic when the tremor hits. You simply adjust your footing and consult your map.
But if your worldview assumes the ground is solid rock, if you assume your buddy the CEO will always be there to sign your contracts, a tiny shift in the org chart will throw you completely off balance and destroy your pipeline.
It absolutely will.
So the mandate for you, the listener, is to aggressively audit your own success. Don't wait for a crisis. Look at the professional methods you use every single day. Identify one tactic you rely on simply because it's always worked, and actively interrogate it.
Does it hold up to the current realities of your industry?
Right. Don't wait for the wave to wash your sandcastle away before you realize you built your livelihood too close to the water.
And acknowledging that the tide is coming naturally leads to the question of how we actually prepare the ground. How do we build a structure that survives the wave?
Which brings us to another foundational premise of the text, one that completely redefines two very common business words.
It really does.
The text lays down this hard, uncompromising rule. In the complex sale, a good tactical plan is only as good as the strategy that led up to it.
We absolutely must define our terms clearly here because strategy and tactics are thrown around in corporate meetings constantly.
Usually interchangeably.
Right, which the authors argue is a fatal mistake.
So let's separate them. According to the framework in the text, tactics are your face-to-face tools. This is what you do when you are actively in the room or on the Zoom call with the client.
Right.
Tactics encompass your presentation skills, your ability to handle objections on the fly, your body language, your eye contact, trial closes. It is essentially the performance.
Yes, tactics are the execution in the moment. Strategy, on the other hand, is defined as the pre-call positioning.
The behind-the-scenes work.
Exactly. It's all the analytical, structural work you do before you ever open your mouth in front of a prospect. Strategy is the overarching plan designed to ensure you are getting in front of the right person at the exact right time with a message tailored to their specific structural needs.
I know a lot of people listening might be rolling their eyes a bit, thinking, I already know the dictionary definitions of strategy and tactics.
Sure.
But I want to elevate this, because the authors aren't just giving us a vocabulary lesson, they're pointing out a massive systemic failure in how modern business operates. They argue that companies wildly over-index on tactical training while completely ignoring strategy.
Well, it happens because tactics are highly visible and relatively easy to train.
That makes sense.
You can put a salesperson in a room and teach them how to overcome the price objection in an afternoon. You can teach them how to design a beautiful slide deck. It feels like actionable progress.
But strategy is invisible.
Strategy looks like someone staring at a computer screen reading an annual report or mapping out a corporate hierarchy on a whiteboard. It doesn't look like selling.
I'm going to play the skeptic for a moment here.
Go for it.
We all know that incredibly charismatic person in our industry. The natural charmer who can just walk into a room, own the space, and close deals on pure magnetic personality. If you have that level of tactical brilliance, why bog yourself down in all this analytical desk work? Why spend hours mapping out labyrinths when you can just be out there shaking hands and charming the room?
It's a fair question, but it attacks the central persistent myth of the born salesperson. The authors argue vehemently that relying purely on tactical charm is a relic of a bygone era.
It doesn't work anymore.
Tactical brilliance is completely and utterly wasted if your strategy is fundamentally flawed. I mean, charisma cannot bypass the procurement department's strict vendor guidelines.
It's like having the absolute best stand-up comedy routine in the world, perfectly timed, brilliantly delivered, but performing it in an empty room or to an audience that doesn't even speak your language.
That is a perfect analogy. The text uses a very painful scenario to illustrate this.
That was the June Richards story.
Yes. So imagine you walk into an executive's office. You deliver a flawless, classic textbook presentation. You anticipate and overcome every single objection with total grace.
You're crushing it.
You are. The executive is genuinely awed. They lean back and say, "That was terrific. Your solution perfectly matches our departmental needs. I really wish I'd known you were coming today. I would have made sure June Richards was here to approve the budget for it."
So, utilizing your tactical training, you attempt to smooth close and ask, great, can we bring June in right now?
And the executive replies, "No, June is on a leave of absence in Nigeria for the next month."
Ugh, that is a brutal realization. You just burned your absolute best material, your time, and your energy on someone who literally does not possess the structural authority to write the check.
Your tactics were perfect, your performance was flawless, but your strategy was non-existent. You failed to do the essential pre-call desk work to discover that June was the actual economic buyer and that she wouldn't even be in the country.
You fought a brilliant battle on the completely wrong battlefield.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to trace this back to its origins, the text points out that these words come from ancient Greek military terminology. Tactics refer to the art of moving forces in actual combat on the battlefield.
Right.
Strategy is the art of moving those forces into advantageous positions before the battle even begins.
You have to successfully march the troops to Gettysburg and secure the high ground before you can even begin to figure out how to arrange them for the actual fight.
Exactly. The goal of a robust sales strategy is to orchestrate your position. It's about getting yourself to the right place with the right key players at the right time so that when you finally do deploy those brilliant face-to-face tactics, they actually have an impact.
If you plunge headfirst into a complex corporate organization without a method for organizing the vast amount of data, who reports to whom, whose budget is actually funding the project, who feels threatened by the change, who is allied with your competitor, you are setting yourself up for failure, regardless of how charming your smile is.
And the text makes a subtle but profound point regarding intent as well. People who rely solely on tactics often adopt an adversarial mindset. They view sales as a combat sport.
Like they're always trying to con the buyer or beat the customer.
Right, or overcome their defenses. But true strategic selling is not adversarial. The operating question shouldn't be, how can I beat this buyer into submission? The operating question must be, how can I effectively manage this complex sale toward a solution?
It requires a fundamental shift in identity. You have to evolve from being a performer on a stage to being an orchestrator of a complex system. You're trying to align multiple disparate interests toward a mutually beneficial outcome, not just score a quick, ego-driven victory.
It is the difference between playing checkers and playing three-dimensional chess.
So a hard, actionable takeaway for the listener right now: audit your calendar. Look at how you spend your time preparing for a major pitch or a critical internal meeting. You should be dedicating at least twice as much time to researching the structural reality of your target count as you do practicing your actual slide deck.
Identifying all the hidden players, mapping the labyrinth.
Yes, desk work is not a distraction from your actual job. In the complex sale, desk work is the absolute foundation of your job.
And understanding the necessity of that desk work brings us to the final and perhaps most introspective premise of the chapter. It forces us to examine our own relationship with our past wins.
The authors present this premise as a stark dividing line. They say, you can succeed in sales today only if you know what you're doing and why.
On the surface, that sounds incredibly obvious, almost like a platitude,
Right.
But the authors reveal just how shockingly rare this trait actually is in the professional world. They share this profound anecdote drawn from their own extensive experience as senior executives, where they were tasked with interviewing literally hundreds of top-tier sales candidates.
Let's set the context for those interviews, because these weren't college kids looking for an entry-level gig. These candidates were already highly successful.
Oh, yeah. They were the top producers at their respective branches, the President's Club winners. The authors were trying to filter the very good from the truly elite to build an unstoppable team.
So they would sit down with these top performers and ask a very simple, direct question. Why are you so successful? What specific mechanism sets you apart from the rest of the pack?
And the answers they received were genuinely alarming. The text notes that fully 99% of these top-tier performers gave incredibly vague, almost mystical answers.
Like what?
They attributed their massive tangible success to things like luck, or I was given a great territory, or I just outwork everybody else.
Or I just have a natural knack for reading people in a room.
Exactly. They had absolutely no mechanical understanding of why they were winning. They were undeniably successful, but they were operating in a state of unconscious competence.
I want to dig into that term, unconscious competence, because it sounds like a good thing at first. It sounds like being in the zone.
Sure, it feels good.
But the problem, as the authors astutely point out, is that unconscious competence cannot be replicated. If you don't actually know the structural reasons why you won a deal today, you will have absolutely no idea how to diagnose and fix the problem when you lose a deal tomorrow.
When the waves of change eventually hit, and we established earlier that they always do, and your supposedly lucky streak runs out, or your golden territory gets slashed in half by management, you have no foundational system to fall back on. You are left entirely exposed.
That's why the authors only hired the 1%.
Okay.
The elite 1% were the candidates who could clearly, analytically, and dispassionately articulate their own methodology. They didn't point to the stars and say, I'm just lucky.
No, they said things like, I have a systematic step-by-step process for identifying the 3 key decision makers in any new account. I have a method for qualifying their specific structural needs, and I map a strict timeline for executive sign-off.
The 1% understood the internal mechanics of their own success. They didn't view business development as a personality trait or some dark art. They treated it as a true profession.
They rejected the classic Horatio Alger myth of luck and pluck and replaced it with rigorous process.
Think about any other high-stakes profession: medicine, law, aviation, engineering. They all rely on strict, documented processes. A surgeon doesn't just cut you open and trust their gut instinct to find the problem, right?
I hope not.
Right. They follow a rigorous diagnostic and surgical process. A pilot uses a pre-flight checklist, no matter how many thousands of hours they have in the air. If navigating the complex sale is truly a profession, it requires a conscious, planned system of steps that are visible, logical, and inherently repeatable.
And the text notes something truly fascinating about the psychological profile of these strategic professionals, that 1%. They are characterized by a state of continuous dissatisfaction.
Dissatisfaction.
Yeah. Even when they're leading the pack. Even when they're crushing their quotas, they are constantly reviewing and refining their own processes. They are always interrogating their own methods, asking, how can I make my system more efficient? Where are the blind spots in my current map? Instead of just resting on their laurels and coasting.
They do that because they understand that relying on trial and error is professional suicide in a world defined by constant change. If you possess a deep understanding of your own process Every failure, every lost deal is simply new data.
Exactly. It's information you can use to tweak and optimize the system.
But if you rely on luck or pure charisma, every failure becomes a devastating crisis of confidence. You don't know broke, so you don't know how to fix it.
It ultimately comes down to taking total control of your professional destiny by forcing yourself to move out of the realm of abstract feelings and into the realm of concrete analytical process.
So the ultimate practical takeaway for this section is the critical importance of documentation. The next time you win a tough negotiation, or land a huge client, or successfully navigate a complex internal project to get a budget approval, do not just pop the champagne, celebrate, and move on to the next task.
Now, sit down while it's fresh and write out the exact steps you took. Document the architecture of your win.
Who did you talk to first? What piece of information completely changed the dynamic of the deal? Who were the hidden influencers? Document your process. Because while you cannot reliably replicate luck, you can absolutely replicate a well-defined, tested system.
You really have to become a student of your own success.
Let's pull all of these threads together. We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today, diving deep into the DNA of the modern complex sale and the shifting realities of the corporate labyrinth.
If we were to distill the absolute soul of this first chapter into a single unifying insight, it is a definitive wake-up call. The era of the lone wolf, glad-handing business person succeeding purely on charm, gut instinct, and a firm handshake is dead and buried.
The modern business landscape is not a straightforward, well-lit path. It is a complex, deeply layered, and rapidly shifting labyrinth. The ground is constantly moving beneath our feet, driven by mergers, sudden downsizing, aggressive re-engineering, and relentless technological disruption.
And to merely survive, let alone truly thrive, in that labyrinth, you must fundamentally change your approach. You must replace your ego, your reliance on tactical charisma, and your comfortable historical assumptions with a rigorous, analytical, and highly adaptable strategy.
You have to commit to doing the hard, often invisible desk work.
Yes, identifying structural complexity. You have to find out who actually holds the power today, not yesterday, and build a comprehensive roadmap before you ever begin your tactical performance.
The ultimate insight we want you to walk away with is that professional success in a complex environment isn't something that just happens to you. It's not a lottery ticket you scratch off. It is a precise, mechanical process that you must consciously and meticulously orchestrate.
You can no longer afford to be just a participant in your deals. You have to become the architect of your own outcomes.
Now that we fully understand exactly why we so desperately need a reliable map for this corporate labyrinth and why relying on luck is a fool's errand, we need to know how to draw that map. So next time, we're going to look at the actual blueprint.
Yes, we'll be exploring the critical structural differences between building your grand strategy and deploying your daily tactics as we dive deeply into Chapter 2.
But before we leave you today, I want to plant a lingering thought for you to seriously mull over.
I want you to think about your biggest client or your most important internal professional relationship right now, the cornerstone account, the one you rely on the most for your revenue or your professional standing.
The one you currently think of is a sure thing.
Exactly that one. Now, ask yourself a hard question. If their company completely reorganized tomorrow morning and your main point of contact, your buddy, your internal champion, the person you play golf with, was suddenly fired, would you still have a strategic, documented pathway to success within that organization? Or is your entire professional livelihood currently built on the incredibly fragile, highly vulnerable foundation of one single relationship?
What if the real reason you just lost that sure thing deal, like that massive business pitch, wasn't actually a flaw in your presentation at all?
Oh, that is a terrifying thought for most people.
Right. Like, what if it was just the simple fact that you were standing in the completely wrong strategic position before you even opened your mouth?
It is a really painful question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we have all been in that room. You know the room.
Oh, yeah.
You have the pristine slide deck. Your pitch is totally flawless. You anticipate every single objection they could throw at you.
They've got the ROI calculators all dialed in.
Exactly. You deploy every closing technique you've ever learned, and then poof, the deal still evaporates.
Gone.
Yeah, and you walk out of the building into the parking lot completely bewildered, just wondering what on earth went wrong.
You just replaying the tape in your head, and you blame the product features, or you blame your pricing model, or maybe you even blame your own charisma. Like, maybe I wasn't funny enough today.
Which is almost never the actual issue.
No, it's not. And that's why today We are going completely under the hood of that specific type of failure. Welcome to this deep dive into the core concepts from Chapter 2 of the New Strategic Selling.
Yes, specifically focusing on this massive paradigm shift around your starting point, your position.
Right, because the biggest realization we're going to explore today is that your in-the-room tactics simply do not matter if your starting position is wrong.
That is the core mission of our whole conversation today. We are going to map out exactly how you determine your strategic starting point before you ever set foot in a sales call.
Or a negotiation or a high-stakes board meeting, whatever it is.
Exactly. And this is absolutely fundamental for anyone listening who is in business or sales or entrepreneurship.
Because jumping straight into tactical execution without understanding your strategic position is, well, it's exactly like running a sprint blindfolded.
That is the perfect way to put it. You might have Olympic-level form, right? You might be moving incredibly fast, but you are completely at the mercy of the environment.
You're going to hit a wall.
You are absolutely going to hit a wall. You have to know where you are standing before you can decide where you are going.
So let's just get right into the mechanics of this. Because the material hits us immediately with this distinction that I think we often gloss over in everyday corporate speak. And that's the heavy line between strategy and tactics.
Oh, people throw these words into emails interchangeably all the time.
All the time. Like, we need a new sales strategy, or let's discuss our marketing tactics.
Right, we just treat them like fancy synonyms for planning.
Yeah, exactly. But if you want to actually win complex deals, the source text makes it so clear that you have to separate these two concepts entirely.
You really do. And to understand why, I think we have to strip away all that modern corporate jargon. We need to look at the actual mechanism of what these words originally meant.
Right, the text goes back to the Greek roots, which I found fascinating.
It's so helpful, and it's not just a history lesson. It's to understand how much we've diluted these ideas. So the word tacticos.
Tacticos.
Yeah, it translates to fit for arranging or maneuvering. Historically, it referred to moving your forces around once you were already on the battlefield, actively engaged with the enemy.
So you're already in the fight.
Exactly. That is tactics. It is what you do when you're face-to-face. In business, it's the questioning, the active listening, handling the objections in real time.
It's the hand-to-hand combat in the boardroom.
Precisely. But then you look at the other word, strategos. That word translates to general, like the art of the general.
Oh, right. The person sitting on the hill looking at the whole map.
Yes. Strategy is the overarching process of setting up those forces. It's determining the terrain, positioning your assets, all before the battle even begins.
So it's all the prep work.
It's the setup.
Yeah.
Because the stark reality in business is that you simply cannot win a battle if you haven't marched your troops to the right battlefield in the first place.
It's the Gettysburg problem,
right?
Like, before you can execute brilliant tactical maneuvers at Gettysburg, the general actually has to figure out how to march the army to Pennsylvania.
Exactly. You could be the most naturally gifted tactician in your entire industry, an absolute master of maneuvering a conversation. But if you are sitting in the wrong room, talking to a person who has no actual buying authority, all of that tactical brilliance is entirely wasted.
It is completely useless. And I was thinking about the sports analogy used in the text to illustrate this, and it just perfectly captures the absurdity of how most sales teams actually operate today.
It's a great analogy.
So imagine a professional football coach bringing his team into the locker room on a Monday. They are getting ready for a huge, high-stakes divisional game on Sunday.
A must-win game.
Right. And the coach stands up and says, all right, everyone, change of plans. We aren't going to watch any game film this week.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he says, we aren't going to study the opponent's defensive schemes. We aren't going to look at their blitz packages. We aren't going to map out their weaknesses at all.
Just completely ignoring the intelligence.
Exactly. Instead, he says, we are just going to spend 60 straight hours on the practice field running, hitting drills, just blocking, tackling, running, and passing. Pure fundamentals.
I mean, they would be humiliated on Sunday. It would be an absolute slaughter.
Right, because blocking and tackling, that's tactics. And yes, you obviously need to know how to block and tackle.
I can't win without it.
But executing those techniques without a pre-game plan, without studying the specific environment you are walking into, it means you're just firing off energy into a void.
You might hit really hard, but you're hitting the wrong guy.
Exactly. The linebacker is coming from the left, and you're blocking perfectly to the right.
And yet, as crazy as that sounds, This is the default operating system for a massive percentage of the business world today. People just fall in love with the action.
The hustle culture.
Yeah, they think the only skills that actually generate revenue are the ones deployed in the live meeting. They view the desk time, like the deep analysis, the pre-call planning, mapping out the corporate hierarchy. They view all of that as administrative busy work.
Like it's a chore they have to do before they get to the fun stuff.
Right. They just want to be out there shaking hands, reading the room, making pitches. But action without direction isn't strategy, it's just thrashing around.
Okay, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second, because I think a lot of people listening might be rolling their eyes just a little bit at this point.
Okay, say at me.
So, sure, the football analogy makes sense in theory, but in the real world, come on, I have personally seen naturally charismatic sales reps walk into a room completely cold with zero preparation.
Oh, we all know one of those.
Right. No map of the organization, no strategy, and they just win the room on pure personality.
Yeah.
They read the room in real time, they adapt, and they walk out with a signed contract.
That happens.
So how does this rigid, strategic framework account for pure talent? Because to me, that feels like winning without strategy.
It is a totally fair pushback. And you're right, those people absolutely exist. We all know someone who can seemingly charm their way through a brick wall, and yes, sometimes they win. But you have to ask yourself, is that success based on a repeatable process, or is it based on luck?
Scalability.
Exactly, because relying purely on tactical charm is a massive gamble. It works beautifully right up until the environment changes.
What do you mean by the environment changing?
Well, think about it. The moment the economy tightens up, or a company implements a more rigorous procurement process, or let's say the buying committee expands from one friendly manager who loves your jokes to a board of 5 skeptical executives who only care about the ROI.
The charm just shatters.
It shatters completely. Operating on charm without a strategic foundation is essentially operating on wishful thinking. There's this brilliant, somewhat tragicomic scenario that highlights this exact mindset perfectly.
Oh, the streetlight story from the text.
Yes, the streetlight. So picture a man walking through a dark park at night. He reaches into his pocket and accidentally drops a really valuable coin in the tall grass. He spends a few seconds feeling around in the dark, gets frustrated, and then decides to walk 3 blocks down the street to the downtown area. He gets on his hands and knees under a bright, glaring streetlight and starts frantically searching for the coin there.
Right.
So a police officer walks up, sees this, and asks what he's doing. The man says, "I'm looking for a coin I dropped." The officer asks, "Did you drop it around here?"
And the punchline.
The man replies, "No, I dropped it back in the dark park, but the light is much better over here."
That is just painfully accurate. I mean, he is operating entirely on what he wishes were true.
Exactly.
He wishes the solution was located where it's easiest for him to look, rather than dealing with the dark, complicated reality of where the problem actually is.
And that is exactly what you are doing when you walk into a meeting relying solely on your ability to wing it. You are looking under the streetlight.
You're hoping the environment matches your skill set.
Yes. You are hoping that the person sitting across from you just happens to be the final economic buyer. You are hoping their pain points perfectly align with your off-the-cuff pitch. You are banking on a reality that is convenient for you, rather than taking the time to map the actual reality of the account.
So the mandate here is that you have to brutally audit your own preparation.
Brutally. You should never, ever engage in a tactical face-to-face maneuver without a strategic plan designed specifically to engineer that encounter.
Your strategy's entire job is to put you in front of the right person at the exact right time under the right conditions.
Which really forces a massive perspective shift for most professionals.
Yeah, because we have to stop treating the pitch, the presentation, as the main event.
The pitch is Act 2.
Act 1 is the strategy of getting yourself into the right room with the right leverage. But, if I accept that, if I start looking at the bigger picture and engineering these encounters, it brings up a whole new set of problems for me.
How so?
Because suddenly, I'm not just looking at a single transaction today. I can't just be a hit-and-run salesperson. I'm looking at the entire lifespan of my relationship with this client.
And this is exactly where the friction between short-term tactical thinking and long-term strategy becomes really dangerous.
That's a huge trap.
It's incredibly easy to become so hyper-obsessed with the immediate, short-term tactical victory, like closing the deal today, hitting this quarter's quota, that you actively destroy the overall health of the account in the long term.
Winning the battle, but losing the war.
Exactly. And the text points out that this stems from a very specific toxic psychology that is rampant in corporate culture. It's the beat the buyer mentality.
Right, I've heard that phrase so many times.
It is an adversarial worldview where the salesperson or the negotiator views the client essentially as an opponent to be conquered. The internal monologue is always, how can I outsmart this buyer? How can I back them into a corner so they have to sign?
How can I extract my commission from this situation?
Yes, it's treating business like a zero-sum game.
If I win, you must lose.
Right. But true strategy flips that entirely. The ultimate goal of a sound strategy is not to figure out how to conquer the buyer. The goal is to ask, how can I manage this complex process so that the outcome is mutually beneficial and sustainable?
Because if you force a tactical victory that hurts the client, the blowback is going to be fierce.
It will destroy you eventually.
There is a fantastic real-world scenario from the material that perfectly illustrates this agonizing tension.
The tech company story.
Yes. It involves this major technology company that had developed a highly sophisticated new computer assembly, and they did their market research, and they knew for a fact that the industry was hungry for this specific technological leap.
The buyers wanted it. The buzz was definitely there.
The obvious tactical play, like the move that would satisfy the board and fleet the quarterly revenue instantly, would be to rush this product to market, capture all those massive initial sales, and celebrate the short-term win.
I mean, that is the dream scenario for a sales team. The market is literally begging for what you have in your warehouse.
But there's a massive catch. The tech company's internal engineers and strategists looked deeper. They realized that while the buyers definitely wanted the product, their internal infrastructures and training programs were nowhere near ready to actually operate it.
The technology was just too far ahead of the users.
Right. If they sold it immediately, it would be forced into environments where it would inevitably fail. So this company made a strategic decision that must have caused absolute chaos in their boardroom.
Oh, I can't even imagine the screaming.
They chose to hold back. They actively, intentionally decided to delay their launch and let a major competitor be the first to market with a similar product.
I want to pause here and just sit with how incredibly difficult that decision is to make in reality.
It goes against every instinct.
Completely. Imagine being the VP of sales in that boardroom. Your compensation, your team's morale, your stock options, everything is tied to quarterly revenue. You have eager buyers holding signed purchase orders, and the strategy team is telling you to put your hands in your pockets and let your rival take the money.
From a purely tactical standpoint, it looks like corporate malpractice.
You are voluntarily handing market share to the enemy.
It looks insane. But let's look at how the dominoes actually fell.
Please do.
So the competitor, predictable as always, took the bait. They saw the open lane, they sprinted for the short-term tactical sales, and they book the initial revenue.
Huge celebrations at their headquarters, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. But almost immediately, reality set in. The competitors started drowning in angry customer service calls.
Because the buyers weren't ready.
Exactly. The systems were crashing, the buyers were frustrated because they couldn't operate the tech, implementations were failing left and right, the competitors' brand reputation took a massive public hit. They became associated with failure and frustration.
And meanwhile, what is the original company doing?
They are sitting back, watching the competitor take all the arrows. They let the competitor absorb the massive cost of educating the market on how complex this transition was actually going to be.
So smart.
They let the buyers learn the hard lessons about infrastructure requirements. And then, once the market had matured and finally understood what was actually needed to run this tech, the original company stepped in with their refined product and completely dominated.
It's beautiful.
They reaped massive, sustainable, long-term profits purely because they chose caution over a quick hit.
It is a masterclass in strategic discipline. And it illustrates one of the hardest lessons in business, which is that sometimes the absolute best strategic decision you can make is the active choice not to close a piece of business.
To walk away.
Yes. If a sale does not serve the long-term health, success, and readiness of the account, walking away isn't a failure. Walking away is a strategic victory.
It prevents you from transforming a momentary tactical win into a protracted long-term disaster.
Exactly. But let's be honest about human nature here. That requires an almost superhuman level of discipline.
Totally. In the heat of the moment, With the end of the quarter looming, with your manager asking for pipeline updates every 12 hours,
Yeah.
how do you actually step back and make that call objectively?
You can't just rely on a vague gut feeling.
Right. If you go to your boss and say, yeah, I'm not closing this massive deal because my gut says the client isn't ready.
You're going to get fired immediately.
You are out the door. You need a systematic framework to evaluate your position logically and defend your decisions.
You need a diagnostic tool. And that brings us to the core engine of this entire methodology. How do we actually formulate a strategy that allows us to make those really tough calls?
So the text breaks this down into 4 steps.
Right. It boils down to a continuous loop of 4 specific steps. Step 1 is analyzing your current position. Step 2 is thinking through possible alternate positions. Step 3 is selecting the best alternate position and building an action plan. And step 4 is the tactical implementation.
Okay.
But the entire engine hinges completely on step 1. In fact, this framework argues that having a strategy and having a position are functionally the exact same concept.
Wait, having a strategy and having a position are the same thing.
Literally identical. You cannot formulate a strategy if you do not have a crystal clear understanding of your current position.
Which sounds incredibly obvious, right? Like
Right.
you know where you are. But there is a really profound nuance here in the text that completely changed how I think about this.
The part about always having a position.
Yes, the framework insists that you always have a position. You are never, ever in a state of having no position. Even if you're staring at a massive, complex enterprise deal,
Yeah.
and you have absolutely no idea who the decision maker is, you don't know their budget, you don't know their timeline, and you feel completely lost.
That is your position.
Yes, your position is, I am lost.
And acknowledging that is absolutely critical. Let's go back to the military analogy for a moment.
Mm.
Picture a general standing in a command tent looking down at a huge topographical map.
Okay, I see it.
But he doesn't know where his own troops are located. He has no intelligence on the enemy's location, he doesn't know the status of his supply lines, and he doesn't know if the terrain outside is a swamp or a mountain.
So he's completely blind.
Right. Now, if that general points at a random spot on the map and gives the order to attack, he is committing a war crime against his own people.
It's suicide.
Because his strategy must be a direct reflection of his position. And if his position is, I am blind and lost, his immediate strategy cannot be to attack. His strategy must be halt and gather intelligence.
It's like the GPS analogy, right?
Exactly.
Before your phone can map a route to a restaurant across town, the very first thing it has to do is drop a blue pin indicating exactly where your car is currently sitting. If the GPS thinks you are in New York when you are actually in Chicago, every single direction it gives you will be catastrophically wrong.
No matter how efficient the algorithm is.
Right. You have to drop your "you are here" pin.
And doing that, dropping that pin, requires a level of radical honesty that is deeply, deeply uncomfortable for most business professionals.
Why is it so uncomfortable? I mean, we all want to succeed. Why wouldn't we be honest about where we are?
Because corporate culture conditions us to constantly project confidence. We are trained to always have an answer, to always sound authoritative in those pipeline review meetings.
Oh, man. Pipeline reviews. Everybody just lying to each other.
Basically. The rep says, oh yeah, the deal's looking great. I've got a great relationship with the project manager. We're definitely closing in Q3.
But deep down,
Deep down, the rep knows the project manager doesn't actually have the authority to sign a check. But admitting ignorance in business is often penalized. It's viewed as weakness.
right, if you say, I don't know, managers get nervous.
But from a strategic standpoint, admitting your ignorance, acknowledging your uncertainty, is a massive achievement. It is the very first step out of the dark.
If you pretend you know the way when you are lost, you're just the guy looking for the coin under the streetlight again.
You're building a strategy on pure fiction.
So how do we force ourselves into this radical honesty? How do we actually drop that blue pin and find our starting point without just, guessing or lying to ourselves? Because we can't just meditate on it. We need a process.
We do. And this is where we move from theory into actual hands-on application. The text outlines a diagnostic workshop you have to run on your own accounts.
Let's walk through this workshop.
Okay, so to do this, you don't pick your easiest deal. And you don't pick the deal that is already dead in the water. You look at your pipeline and you select an active account that causes a specific physical reaction.
A physical reaction.
Yeah, a twinge of uneasiness in your gut.
Oh, we all know that feeling. It's the 2.0 AM deal.
Your 2.0 AM deal.
It's the deal that looks totally fine on a spreadsheet, Your manager's super happy with it, but for some reason, it's the one you wake up staring at the ceiling, thinking about it 2 in the morning. Something just feels off.
Exactly. You picked that deal. The very first step to mapping your position is to identify the external changes that are currently affecting that specific sales environment.
So what counts as a change?
It could be anything external. It isn't abstract. You have to literally list them out on paper. It could be massive macroeconomic shifts like interest rates spiking.
Or inflation.
Right. It could be industry specific, like a new government regulation hitting your client sector. Or it could be hyperlocal, like a new CEO taking over your target client's company.
Or what if your internal champion, the person who loves you, suddenly takes a medical leave?
That's a massive change. Or it could even be a change on your own end, like your company just rolled out a totally new, more expensive pricing model.
So you basically just brain dump every single variable that is shifting. But why focus so heavily on change? I mean, things change every single day in business.
Because there is a fascinating psychological truth at play here. Change, in and of itself, is not actually what causes us disorientation or stress. A change is just a data point.
Okay, so what causes the stress?
What causes the 2.0 AM panic is the uncertainty of not knowing how you're going to react to that change. It's the blank space that terrifies us.
Oh, that makes sense.
By forcing yourself to take these vague, looming anxieties and physically write them down as a list of concrete external changes, you are dragging the monsters out from under the bed and putting them under a microscope.
You're defining the variables. Okay, so let's say I've got my list. Let's say I write down client's budget got slashed by 10%. New competitor entered the market. And our main contact just quit.
A rough week.
Right. Now what? I'm just staring at a list of depressing facts.
Now you have to objectively categorize each of those changes as either a threat or an opportunity.
A threat or an opportunity.
And this is where the methodology demands absolute rigor. You cannot just throw your hands up and say, well, the budget got cut, so everything is terrible, we're doomed.
Which is the natural reaction.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
But you have to categorize it to build a blueprint. The text uses an analogy here that I really love. Think about a master carpenter inspecting a house he's been hired to renovate.
Okay, I love a good construction analogy.
The carpenter walks around the property and notices that the entire south-facing wall is rotting from water damage.
That's bad.
It's very bad. That rotting wall is a change in the environment. It is an objective threat to the structural integrity of the house. But the master carpenter does not panic. He doesn't just grab a sledgehammer and start wildly swinging at the rotting wood.
If he did that, the roof would collapse on his head.
Exactly. He acknowledges the threat, steps back, and draws up a blueprint. He calculates exactly where he needs to place temporary support beams to hold the roof up before he begins the demolition.
So the workshop we're doing, listing these things out, is the blueprint. Writing down the threats allows you to figure out exactly where your strategy is structurally unsound. So you know where to place your support beams.
Precisely. But here is where it gets really interesting, where you have to push yourself strategically. Let's say one of the changes on your list is a massive global economic downturn.
Right, which feels entirely out of my control. Like, if the global economy is freezing up, how does categorizing that on a piece of paper actually help me? It's a massive threat, period. I can't fix the economy.
You can't fix the economy. But this framework insists on a radical premise. It argues that no matter how objectively terrible a macroeconomic fact might be, almost any change can be viewed as either a threat or an opportunity.
Really? Any change?
It depends entirely on how you choose to strategically respond to it. You don't control the change, but you control your position relative to it.
Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack that. How on earth does a global economic freeze become an opportunity? I just don't see it.
Let's play it out practically. So budgets are freezing across your entire industry. If your current strategy is trying to sell a premium, super expensive, nice-to-have software product to a mid-level manager who is focused on growth, yes, that economic freeze is a massive deal-killing threat.
They won't buy it. Growth is dead.
Right. But if you take a step back and analyze your position, that exact same economic freeze is a golden opportunity to pivot. It's an opportunity to re-engineer your messaging. You stop pitching your product as a luxury growth engine, and you reposition it as an essential cost-saving efficiency tool. You change your target audience entirely. You stop talking to the mid-level manager, and you leverage the economic panic to get a meeting with the chief financial officer.
Because the CFO is currently desperately looking for ways to consolidate spending and cut overhead.
Exactly. The external fact, the bad economy, did not change one single bit. but your strategic response transformed it from a fatal threat into a highly lucrative opportunity.
That is powerful. It completely takes you out of the victim mindset.
You are never a victim.
The environment isn't doing something to you, it's just shifting. And you have to shift your weight to maintain your balance. So by writing down this categorized list, you strip away the mystery. Vague anxiety becomes concrete data.
Exactly. You have now successfully mapped the external environment. But mapping the outside world is only half the battle. Now you have to turn the lens inward. You have to map your internal reality. You have to measure your own subjective emotional reaction to the deal as it currently stands. And this leads us to what is arguably the most unique and frankly validating tool we're going to discuss today.
The euphoria panic continuum.
The continuum.
I found this tool so incredibly validating when I read the text, because business literature usually pretends that we are all completely rational robots, like we just operate purely on data and spreadsheets.
Right, leave your emotions at the door.
Exactly. But anyone who has ever closed a complex deal knows that business is intensely emotional. It's driven by gut instinct, fear, ego, and intuition. And this continuum actually weaponizes those feelings and turns them into a diagnostic tool.
It's a brilliant acknowledgement of human nature. Let's break down how this continuum actually looks and works.
Okay.
Picture a horizontal line, a spectrum.
Got it.
It is divided squarely in the middle. The entire left side of the spectrum represents predictability and certainty. If you feel you are on this side regarding a specific deal, your emotions will range from euphoria at the absolute far left edge.
Euphoria meaning I am popping champagne. I am absolutely positive the ink is drying on the contract.
Yes. And as you move slightly right toward the center, the feelings mellow out a bit. You feel great, then just secure, then comfortable, and finally, right near the center line, you just feel okay.
Everything is fine. It's predictable.
Right. But then you cross that center line into the right side of the continuum.
The dark side.
The dark side, which represents unpredictability and uncertainty. And here, the emotional temperature starts to rise.
Okay.
Just over the line, you feel mild concern.
Okay.
Then it deepens into discomfort. That discomfort solidifies into active worry. The worry escalates into genuine fear. And finally, at the far right edge of the spectrum, you are in total blind panic.
Okay, now before anyone starts using this to forecast their quarterly earnings, we have to emphasize a crucial nuance from the text. This continuum is strictly descriptive. It is not predictive.
Let's make sure that's crystal clear. What is the difference?
It means that if you plot yourself on the far left and say, I feel euphoria, this deal is in the bag, that feeling does not mathematically guarantee that you are going to win the business.
Deals fall apart at the goal line all the time.
Constantly. Conversely, if you plot yourself on the far right and say, I am in total panic, it does not guarantee you are going to lose.
Right.
The continuum does not predict the future. What it does is measure your perception of your current position. It is a diagnostic gauge of how your subconscious is processing the reality of the situation.
Like a human radar system. Because our conscious brains are really, really good at lying to us.
Oh, we are masters of self-deception.
We build these complex rationalizations about why a deal is going to close, but our gut processes threats long before our conscious mind wants to acknowledge them.
Yes.
If you look at a pending account and you force yourself to be radically honest and you realize you are hovering over on the right side in worry or panic, your gut is flashing a massive red warning light on your dashboard.
Your subconscious is literally screaming at you that you are flying blind into a mountain. It's telling you that you are missing vital intelligence, or that one of those external changes we mapped earlier is actively threatening the structural integrity of your deal.
And you haven't built a support beam to address it yet.
This perfectly explains the phenomenon of pipeline bloat that drives sales managers absolutely crazy.
Oh, the bloated pipeline?
You know the one. You have a sales rep who has a deal sitting in their CRM marked as 90% probability to close.
It's been there for 6 months.
Right. But if you take that rep out for a beer and you ask them, hey, how do you really feel about this deal? Their body language changes, they get super defensive, and they finally admit they haven't heard from the client in 3 weeks.
Because consciously, they are claiming euphoria on the spreadsheet to keep their boss off their back. But subconsciously, they are in absolute panic.
And why do we lie to ourselves and our CRMs? Because admitting we are in panic mode requires us to actually do hard work. It requires us to admit we don't have control.
The mandate here is that you must listen to the radar. Do not artificially inflate your confidence just to soothe your ego. If you feel panic, you have to own the panic.
Plotting your feelings honestly on this continuum gives you an immediate visceral reality check on how solid your strategic foundation actually is. If you are anywhere in the realm of discomfort, worry, or fear, your foundation is cracking.
Okay, so let's synthesize this into action. Let's say I run the workshop. I list the external changes, I categorize them. Then I check my gut, I look at the continuum, and I realize, objectively, I am in full-blown panic mode about a massive account that makes up half my quota.
Your radar is screaming.
It's screaming. Now what? Because just sitting at my desk knowing I'm panicking doesn't save the deal. What is the actual mechanism for getting out of panic?
That brings us to the pivot point of the entire strategy framework. It is the mechanism that forces action. Right in the dead center of the euphoria-panic continuum, sitting squarely between okay and concern, you have to visualize a giant red stop sign.
A stop sign right in the middle. So I'm moving along the spectrum, checking my feelings, and I hit the sign. What does it force me to do?
When you hit that stop sign, regardless of which side of the continuum you're coming from, it forces you to halt your practical execution and ask a specific, action-oriented question based on your location.
Okay, give me the questions.
If you find yourself anywhere on the right side, the unpredictable, panicky, worried side, the stop sign mandates that you stop what you are doing and ask, what must I change to reduce my anxiety?
What must I change?
Yes, what must you change? And let's look at the other side. What if you are feeling confident? What if you are on the left side feeling secure or great?
Does it just let you coast?
No, the stop sign doesn't let you just coast. It mandates that you ask, do I need to change anything to ensure my continued success?
That is brilliant because it completely eliminates complacency. It stops the arrogance of thinking a deal is ever truly safe until the check literally clears the bank.
Exactly. What is so deeply empowering about this mechanism is that the mandate is identical, whether you are terrified or thrilled. You must consider change. But specifically, you must consider change that you initiate.
The underlying philosophy here is that you are never, ever a passive victim of an account's momentum. You are not just a leaf floating helplessly down the river of the client's procurement process. You have agency.
So if my position is weak, if I am in fear, because, say, I just found out through the grapevine that a new CEO has been hired at my target company, and I know this CEO has to sign off on my deal, but I have never met them.
Your gut is panicking.
Completely. The stop sign forces me to stop hoping for the best and ask, what must I change to reduce this anxiety? And the answer isn't wait and see. The answer is to develop an alternate position.
Yes, drafting your alternate positions list. This is where the high-level strategy finally translates into concrete, boots-on-the-ground action.
How do you define an alternate position?
An alternate position is a specific, self-initiated tactical move you can execute to counteract an environmental threat, regain control, and push your emotional state back toward the predictable left side of the continuum.
So let's play out the CEO example. I'm panicked about the unknown CEO. An alternate position on my list shouldn't be vague, right? It shouldn't just be try to impress the CEO.
No, that's not a position, that's a wish. It needs to be highly actionable.
Yeah.
So maybe alternate position A is identify an internal champion within the company who already has the new CEO's ear and brief that champion so perfectly that they can pitch the deal on my behalf.
That's a solid maneuver. Or maybe alternate position B is leverage a mutual connection on LinkedIn to secure a 10-minute introductory coffee with the CEO, purely to establish rapport, completely separate from the deal.
Exactly. Those are concrete strategic maneuvers designed to alter your reality. The reality is that you must create and actively update this list of alternate positions for every major deal in your pipeline.
It's not a static document.
No, it is a living, breathing tactical playbook. And it is entirely possible that you might start drafting this list and realize you don't actually know how to get to the CEO. You might not have the answers yet. You might realize your intelligence is totally incomplete.
Which feels like it would cause even more panic.
It might, initially. But the framework assures us that this is perfectly fine. Realizing that you don't have the answers, mapping exactly where your blind spots are, is itself a massive strategic achievement.
Why?
Because it tells you exactly what intelligence you need to gather next. It gives your next tactical move absolute clarity.
It's the difference between being lost in the woods and knowing you're lost versus being lost in the woods and confidently sprinting in the wrong direction because you refuse to admit you don't know where north is.
Exactly.
At least if you know you are lost, your very next action is to stop running and start looking for a compass. The clarity of knowing what you don't know actually reduces the panic over time.
It really does. Because anxiety thrives in ambiguity. The moment you give anxiety a name and an action plan, it loses its power over you.
It becomes a puzzle to solve instead of a monster in the closet.
Exactly. So, if we take a step back and synthesize all these core ideas we've explored today, the difference between strategy and tactics, the danger of short-term thinking, dropping the blue pin, mapping changes, and listening to your gut, it all ties together into one definitive, overarching insight.
What is that core insight?
Strategy is ultimately about taking conscious, deliberate control of your position in a world of constant, unpredictable change.
It's an active discipline, not a passive document you stick in a drawer.
Exactly. Your strategic position is never a fixed, permanent coordinate on a map. It is a dynamic, living response to the shifting environment around you. It requires constant maintenance, constant radical honesty, and constant adjustment.
Because the environment is always moving.
Always. The economy shifts, personnel changes, competitors adapt. If you do not actively define your own position, if you don't regularly check your gut radar, categorize the incoming threats, and draft alternate positions, then the market's changes will simply define your position for you by default.
And as the graveyard of failed businesses consistently shows us, when the market defines your position for you, it almost certainly will not be in your favor.
No, it won't. You will end up exactly like that football team, spending all your energy practicing blocking and tackling on an empty field while your opponent is running a sophisticated, meticulously researched playbook right past you. You will lose, and you won't even understand why.
That is a profoundly powerful synthesis. It completely redefines what it means to be prepared for a business encounter. It is so much deeper and so much more rigorous than just knowing your product features or having a slick slide deck.
It's the foundation of everything else you do.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of ground today, digging into the deep psychology and the actual mechanics of finding your strategic starting point. I want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this exploration. We know your time is super valuable, and we really hope this deep dive has given you a new lens through which to view your own business battles.
It's a lens that takes practice to use, but it changes everything.
It really does. But of course, now that you know exactly how to drop your "you are here" pin, the obvious question remains: where do you go next? How do you map the rest of the journey once you finally know where you stand?
That's the next big hurdle.
Right. So in future explorations of this methodology, we are going to look at the ultimate strategy blueprint provided in this framework, the 6 key elements. These elements will serve as your absolute unwavering compass as you navigate through the shifting and honestly sometimes terrifying corporate labyrinth.
I can't wait to dig into those. Same here. But before we log off, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Something to really chew on as you go about your week and sit in your upcoming meetings. Think about a major challenge you are facing right now. Whether it is a massive professional deal that is just stalling out, a complex negotiation with a vendor, or even a high-stakes personal decision. Just picture it in your head. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, are you stuck because your day-to-day tactics are failing? Are you just using the wrong words in the room? Or is it because you haven't honestly radically mapped out your true starting position? That's the real question. If you refuse to look at where you are truly standing today, if you refuse to acknowledge the rotting wood in the south wall or the screaming panic in your own gut, how can you possibly expect to take the right step tomorrow? You can't. Take a hard look at your map. Find your pin, and we'll see you on the next deep dive. So I want you to picture this. Have you ever had like a total sure thing deal just completely fall apart at the absolute last minute?
Oh man, everyone has. It is the worst feeling.
Right. You're just sitting there staring at your inbox, wondering what on earth went wrong. I mean, the presentation was flawless.
Yeah.
The product was, it was a perfect fit for their bottleneck. The client was nodding along enthusiastically in literally every single meeting.
You're already spinning the commission in your head.
Exactly. And then just crickets. The deal stalls, the emails go completely unanswered, and you lose the contract.
It's brutal.
But what if the reason you lost wasn't your product or, your pitch or even your pricing model?
Is where everybody usually points the finger.
Right. They blame the product. But
Right.
what if the reason you lost was simply the fact that the person whose name was on the executive you were absolutely certain was making the decision, didn't actually hold the checkbook?
Wow. Yeah, that happens way more often than people want to admit.
So today, we are completely ripping apart the traditional corporate org chart. We are doing a deep dive into a really foundational strategy from the new strategic selling, focusing specifically on this concept of buying influences.
It's such a game changer.
It really is. By the end of this deep dive, you'll understand why relying on a business card title is just like the biggest trap in modern business.
Absolutely.
You'll learn how to identify the 4 critical roles that make or break every single complex sale and exactly how to map the hidden power dynamics inside, well, any organization.
Because honestly, the reality of modern corporate decision-making is it's terrifyingly opaque.
Yeah, opaque is a good word for it.
Like, we tend to operate on these inherited assumptions about authority,
Right.
right? Assumptions that are completely disconnected from how a modern matrix organization actually functions today.
Oh, totally. We walk into a boardroom, we look at who sits at the head of the table, check their LinkedIn title on our phones, and just assume, okay, I understand the power dynamic here.
And that assumption alone is responsible for, billions of dollars in lost revenue every single year.
Billions.
Easily. Because if you don't understand how to map the actual functional roles of the people in front of you, and these are roles that shift dynamically depending on what you're selling, you aren't just flying blind. You are actively sabotaging your own objectives.
So let's start right there with that fundamental shift in mindset. Because we need to define the arena we're actually operating in, which the book calls the complex sale.
Right.
Because in a simple sale, it's easy. You walk into a mom and pop hardware store, you look at the owner behind the register, and you sell them a new point of sale system.
One person, one title, one role, boom, done.
Exactly. But in a complex sale, the entire rule book changes. And the very first thing you have to throw in the trash is the organizational chart.
You really do. Because the defining characteristic of a complex sale is that multiple people, sometimes dozens of people, must give their approval or their input before a buying decision can actually be finalized.
It's never just one signature anymore.
No, never. You are dealing with overlapping layers of authority, you've got competing departmental budgets, and vastly different personal agendas.
It's a mess.
It is. And in that environment, relying on someone's official job title is a fatal error. Corporate structures right now are in a state of, constant violent flux.
Yeah, especially post-pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. We have continuous mergers, acquisitions, agile restructuring, downsizing. You've got executives playing musical chairs across divisions. You just cannot look at a title and derive functional authority from it.
But I feel like that is so incredibly counterintuitive for most people. If I'm selling, let's say, supply chain logistics software, and I get a meeting with the vice president of purchasing, my immediate instinct is, great, I found the buyer. I found the guy who purchases things.
And to be fair, that vice president of purchasing might indeed have absolute unilateral approval power if you were selling them like a standard restock of office supplies.
Right, the routine stuff.
Yeah, routine maintenance services, things like that. But if you try to sell that exact same person a multi-million-dollar AI-driven warehouse automation system,
Everything changes.
instantly, their power might just evaporate. Suddenly, they don't have the authority to sign off at all. The board might need to approve it. The CTO might need to vet the AI. Regional managers might have veto power.
So the title VP of Purchasing stayed exactly the same, but their actual role in your specific sale is entirely different.
Precisely. And this is exactly why you have to identify players based on 4 distinct buying influence roles that are universally present in every single complex sale.
I want to use the football analogy from the source material here because I think it perfectly visualizes how aggressively a role can change without the title changing at all.
It's a great analogy.
So think about a player on a football team whose official roster position, his title is the center. Now, what does the center do?
She snaps the ball.
Right. On 95% of the plays, his standard function is to snap the ball to the quarterback and then immediately block the defensive line. That's what his title dictates he does.
Right, but you have to pay attention to what happens on a 4th down punt.
Yes.
The context of the play changes entirely. After that center snaps the ball, his role violently and instantly shifts. He's no longer functioning as a blocker.
Yep.
His role is now defensive tackler. He has to sprint down the field and physically stop the punt returner.
And if you are that punt returner catching the ball and you see this 280-pound center charging full speed right at you, you'd better not say to yourself, oh, I don't need to worry about him. His title is center. He just snaps the ball.
Right. If you rely on his title, you are going to get absolutely crushed.
Completely flattened.
And it is the exact same dynamic when you walk into a corporate headquarters. A player's role can shift just as violently depending on the specific parameters, the dollar amount, and the perceived risk of the sale that's right in front of them.
The title on the door is static, but the role transforms.
It's exactly.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit because I can hear people yelling at their devices right now.
Let's hear it.
Let's say I've been selling to a specific company for, I don't know, 5 years. I know the VP of operations. We play golf together. I sold him a massive logistics package last year.
Okay.
If I'm coming back to sell him the phase 2 expansion of that same logistics package this year, why on earth would I start from a blank slate? That seems like a massive waste of my existing network and political capital.
I know, it feels like a total waste. But leaning on that assumption is exactly how veteran salespeople lose their biggest accounts to hungry competitors.
Really? Just from leaning on the relationship?
Yes, because the core principle here is that buying influences are entirely sales-specific.
Yeah.
The parameters of the organization are not frozen in amber.
Right.
Even if you are pitching the exact same product for the exact same dollar amount as you did 12 months ago, the roles might be played by entirely different human beings this time around.
How so, though, if it's the exact same product?
Because the internal context changed. Maybe the company's capital expenditure budget was slashed in Q1.
Mm-hmm.
So now everything over $50,000 requires CFO approval.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Last year, your golf buddy had the pen.
Huh?
This year, the CFO has the pen. Or, maybe your buddy's department was restructured and implementation is now handled by a brand new IT director who happens to hate your software platform.
And if you just bypass everyone and go straight to your buddy because of last year's dynamic?
You are completely blind to the new reality. You'll walk right into a trap.
So when you are sitting down to plan a pitch, even for a legacy client that you've known for years, you have to actively force yourself to discard the org chart.
Yes, every single time.
You have to look at the specific proposal you are bringing to the table today and ask who is filling the 4 distinct roles for this specific objective.
Precisely. You approach every objective as a blank slate. And that leads us to the most critical role to identify first, the ultimate authority, the economic buyer.
Ah, yes, the economic buyer. The golden rule of this role is brutally simple, and it has been true since the dawn of commerce. Whoever has the gold makes the rules.
That is the defining characteristic.
Yeah.
The economic buyer is the individual, or, sometimes it's a highly unified committee, acting as a single entity who gives the final, unappealable approval to release the funds.
So one who actually signs the check.
Exactly. They are the ultimate authority for this specific transaction. They hold a really unique power in the matrix, which is they can veto everyone else's yes, and they can approve everyone else's no.
They are basically the Supreme Court of the sale.
That's a great way to put it.
Like if the entire engineering department says, we absolutely must have this software, the economic buyer can just look at it and say, no, it's not in the budget. End of discussion.
Yep.
But conversely, if IT and legal both hate your proposal, but the economic buyer decides the strategic value is worth the friction, they can force the entire company to adopt it.
Exactly. And to find them, you have to understand how they view the world, which is vastly different from how everyone else in the company views it.
How so?
Well, the economic buyer is not looking at the bells and whistles of your product. They do not care about the elegant user interface or, the specific coding language you used.
They don't care about the cool feature.
Not at all. Their focus is laser targeted on bottom line impact and price performance.
And we should probably clarify price performance here because it doesn't mean they are just looking for the cheapest option.
Oh, no, not at all. In fact, economic buyers will frequently authorize the most expensive option on the table if the return on investment justifies it.
Right, it's about the return.
Exactly. They are looking at ROI, at EBITDA impact, at how this capital expenditure affects their operational expenses over a 5-year horizon. They're usually highly placed within the organization, VP, C-suite, board level, and they are essentially paid to forecast the future.
They manage the delicate balance of risk and reward for the whole enterprise.
You got it.
There is a wild, extreme example of this in the text that shows just how catastrophically a deal can freeze if you misidentify this person.
Oh, the airplane one.
Yes. So there was an American airplane manufacturer trying to sell a fleet of highly advanced jets to a Middle Eastern country.
Right.
And on paper, they executed a flawless multi-year sales campaign. They got the king of the country to fall in love with the jets.
Doesn't get much higher than the king.
Right. And the generals in the military command were totally on board. The pilots who would actually be flying the combat missions were absolutely thrilled with the specs.
It looks like the ultimate done deal. You have the head of state and the military high command.
So they set up the grand contract signing. The press is there, the executives are smiling, the pens are out, and the king looks at the contract, smiles, and says, "This is wonderful. Now all we have to do is ask the Saudis to lend us the money."
And the entire room just stops breathing.
Just like that, a multi-million-dollar, multi-year deal hits a reinforced brick wall.
It's incredible.
The American executives realized in that exact second that they had never even identified the ultimate economic buyer, the actual entity holding the gold and releasing the funds.
They had been pitching the users and the gatekeepers for years, completely blind to the fact that another sovereign nation held the checkbook.
It's a staggering geopolitical example, but honestly, the exact same mechanism plays out every single Tuesday in mid-market software sales.
Oh, 100%. A sales rep will spend like 6 months whining and dining a director of marketing. The director loves the marketing automation platform. They verbally commit.
We're going with you guys.
Right. They say, "This is great. I'm signing off," and the sales rep goes out and celebrates. Then 2 days later, the director calls back and says, "Yeah, my CMO just informed me that our software budget was frozen pending the new merger. I can't buy it."
The sales rep pitched the wrong person. They pitched a user, assuming they were the economic buyer.
Because they relied on the title director and just assumed it carried financial authority. If you do not find the person whose budget is actually paying for the solution, you are merely having pleasant conversations while your competition is out closing deals.
I look at it kind of like pitching a state-of-the-art navigational system to the captain of a massive cargo ship.
Okay, like this.
You can stand on the bridge and talk about the microchips, the satellite uplink redundancy, and the sleek touch screens all day long. But the captain does not care about circuit boards.
No, they don't.
The captain's entire job is macroeconomic in nature. The captain only wants to know, will this system guarantee my ship arrives at port on time, safely, without burning excess fuel?
Yeah, and if you start pitching circuit boards to the captain, you just prove that you don't understand their role.
Right, you lose credibility.
Exactly. You have to speak the language of the economic buyer.
Right.
But here's the most complex mechanic of this role, and people miss this all the time. The economic buyer is not a static position on the org chart. It is highly volatile, and it's driven by a phenomenon called the float factor.
The float factor. This is where things get really dynamic. Explain how this authority actually, floats.
So the role of the economic buyer floats up or down the corporate hierarchy, almost entirely in direct correlation with perceived risk.
Risk. Okay.
Let's look at the macro environment. If general business conditions are poor, say, the economy has entered a recession, or their specific industry is facing a severe downturn, money becomes incredibly tight.
Sure, budgets get slashed.
Scrutiny increases. So because the risk of spending capital is so high, the authority to release funds floats up the ladder.
So a $100,000 purchase that a branch manager could approve in a booming economy suddenly requires the signature of the regional vice president during a recession.
Exactly. The risk pushed the economic buyer role upward. And the same thing happens based on the dollar amount of your specific proposal.
Makes sense.
If you are selling a $5,000 solution, the economic buyer might be a department head. If you are selling a $5 million solution, the economic buyer is going to be the CEO or the board of directors. The dollar amount dictates the risk, which dictates the elevation of the role.
And it's not just macroeconomics and price tags, right? It's also about your relationship with them.
Absolutely. If the buying organization is completely unfamiliar with you, like if you are a brand new startup they've never heard of, pitching a disruptive technology, the perceived risk of doing business with you is massive.
Because they don't know if you'll go bankrupt in 6 months.
Right. So the economic buyer role floats up to a higher level executive who actually has the authority to absorb that level of vendor risk.
Inversely, if times are booming, the company is flush with cash, and you've been reliably delivering for them for 5 years. The risk is perceived as virtually zero.
Exactly.
In that scenario, the CEO isn't going to waste their time reviewing your contract. They delegate that authority down the ladder to a middle manager. The economic buyer role floats down.
Which brings us to the real operational challenge for anyone listening. How do you actually find this floating target in a massive corporate hierarchy?
Right, because you can't exactly just walk into the lobby and ask the receptionist, hey, who has the gold?
I mean, you could try, but it probably won't end well.
Probably not.
But you can use a very practical heuristic to calibrate your aim. You ask yourself a filtering question. At what level in my own organization would a decision involving this specific amount of money and this specific level of risk have to be made?
Oh, that's smart. Start with your own internal mirrors.
Yes. If you are proposing a $250,000 contract, ask yourself, Who in your own company has the unilateral power to sign a $250,000 check without asking their boss?
Is it a VP? Is it the CEO?
Exactly. You start by identifying that level internally, and then you adjust based on the relative size of the buying company.
Got it.
If you are a 50-person startup selling to a massive global Fortune 500 company, a $250,000 deal is a rounding error to them. The economic buyer over there might just be a mid-level regional director.
But if you flip it,
Right. If you are a massive corporation selling to a 50-person startup, the economic buyer for that exact same amount is unquestionably the founder or CEO.
so you triangulate based on the financial gravity of the deal. Okay, let's say you do this perfectly. You map the float factor, you find the executive holding the gold, you speak their language of ROI, and boom, you get the contract signed.
Victory.
The check clears. At this point, I think a lot of people think the game is over. You won. But a signed contract does not mean the product actually survives in the wild.
Not at all.
And if you want to keep that account, you have to pivot immediately to the second role, the user buyer.
This is where so many brilliant strategic sales fall apart at the tactical level.
Tell me about it.
The user buyers are the people who have to live in the daily operational reality of your product. They are the ones who will actually press the buttons, operate the machinery, or directly supervise the teams using your service.
And their worldview is entirely fundamentally different from the economic buyer's worldview.
Oh, completely.
Huh.
They could not care less about the 5-year EBITDA impact.
They don't care about EBITDA. They don't care about shareholder value. And they frankly don't care if the company saved 10% on the procurement contract.
Right. Their focus is strictly personal and intensely operational. They're really just asking one question. How is this purchase going to impact my daily job performance?
Is this new software going to automate my tedious data entry? Or is it going to crash constantly and force me to work through my lunch break?
Exactly.
And the major structural difference here is that while there is always only one economic buyer per sale, there can be dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of user buyers.
A massive decentralized web of users.
Yeah.
And the sheer power they hold over the long-term success of your business cannot be overstated, even though they don't hold the purse strings.
Right.
User buyers are deeply concerned with reliability, service records, the learning curve of retraining, system downtime. They are terrified of the friction your new solution will introduce into their already stressful day.
There is a story in the text that perfectly illustrates the danger of ignoring these people.
The factory one.
Yeah. A salesperson was pitching a new, complex operational system to a manufacturing plant. And this salesperson decided to be efficient.
Always a dangerous word in sales.
Right. They bypassed the floor staff entirely. They didn't talk to the shift supervisors. They didn't talk to the machine operators. They went straight to the executive suite, straight to the economic buyers, and sold them on the massive cost savings of the new system.
Which is exactly what the economic buyer wants to hear.
Of course. So management signs off. The deal is done. The commission is paid. But then the system actually gets installed on the factory floor.
Yeah.
And the users, the people who actually had to operate this new interface every single day, absolutely hated it. They hadn't been consulted. The interface was clunky for their specific workflows. They felt completely disregarded.
Naturally.
So what did? They refused to cooperate with the transition. They dragged their feet. They blamed literally every missed production quota on the new system. They effectively sabotaged the implementation from the inside out.
It was a silent mutiny.
Exactly. The system became a total disaster, and management eventually had to rip it out. That salesperson killed any chance they ever had for future sales, renewals, or references from that company.
A total burn.
Their hard-learned lesson was, the next time somebody's going to use my stuff, he's going to want it first.
But, this forces us to address a very cynical but very common perspective in the business world.
Which is?
A lot of sales professionals will hear that story and think, well, the salesperson still got their commission check. If the economic buyer signed the check, why do we actually care if the user buyer is grumpy? The transaction is complete.
Right. If my goal is just to hit my quarterly quota, why am I spending hours doing group therapy of middle management on the factory floor? Management bought it. They can force the employees to use it.
And that mindset reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to actually win in modern business. If your only goal is to grab a single commission check and then run away before the implementation fails, then sure, ignore the user buyer. But getting that check to clear is merely a short-term tactical victory.
Especially today.
Right. In complex B2B environments, especially with the rise of SaaS and subscription models, the initial sale is just the beginning.
The real money is in the renewal.
Exactly. True success is a strategic victory. If you want repeat business, if you want cross-selling opportunities across other departments, and if you want glowing referrals to other companies in the industry, the user buyer must succeed.
They have to feel like they won.
They must. Because if they feel like they lost, you trigger a phenomenon known as buyer's revenge.
Buyer's revenge. That sounds ominous.
Yeah.
How does that actually manifest in the real world?
It is lethal to your long-term revenue. Look, management can issue a mandate on high forcing employees to use a new software platform. But if the user buyer isn't actively sold on its value, the implementation will inevitably fail.
They'll just find workarounds.
Exactly. The users will exploit every bug, they will enter data incorrectly, they will refuse to adopt the new workflows, and they'll just maintain their old spreadsheets in secret.
Oh, the secret shadow spreadsheets. I've seen that so many times.
Everyone has. And the product will be blamed for every operational hiccup in the company. And 12 months later, when it comes time for the economic buyer to authorize the contract renewal, the user buyers will organize and loudly declare what a disaster your product was.
And the economic buyer, looking at plummeting productivity metrics, will just cancel the contract.
Without hesitation.
So if you are listening to this and you are designing your sales process, the mandate is clear. Never, ever bypass the people in the trenches.
Never.
You cannot view them as an afterthought. You have to actively identify their day-to-day operational fears early in the sales cycle. You have to sit down with them and say, show me your current workflow. Show me what frustrates you.
Yeah.
You need to transform them from potential internal saboteurs into active champions of your solution.
Because the most powerful force in a complex sale is when a chorus of user buyers marches into the economic buyer's office and says, we need this specific tool. It makes our team 20% faster and removes all of our daily headaches.
When the users demand it, your sale is essentially closing itself.
Structure and empathy. You have to empathize with the daily grind of the user buyer.
Okay, so we've mapped out the executive holding the gold and we've secured the buy-in of the daily operators.
Now for the fun part.
Right. Now we have to face the most notorious, frustrating role in the entire corporate ecosystem, the technical buyer.
The gatekeeper. The text describes them perfectly as people who can't say yes, only no, and usually do.
It's hilarious, but anyone who has ever tried to close a B2B deal knows exactly how painfully accurate that is. Let's define who these people are because they don't exactly walk around with technical buyer on their name tag.
No, they operate under titles like IT security auditor, legal compliance officer, procurement manager, data privacy officer, or finance reviewer.
The people who love paperwork.
Exactly. And their specific functional role in the buying process is not to evaluate the strategic vision of your product. Their role is to screen out possible suppliers.
Right.
They exist to enforce objective specifications. They are the guardians of the fine print.
They are the ones who look at your beautiful visionary software platform and say, yes, but does this meet our ISO 27001 data residency compliance requirements for our European servers?
Exactly that. And you really have to understand the psychology of their position. Their job is, quite literally, to find flaws.
They're paid to find reasons to say no.
They're paid to mitigate risk. If they approve a vendor who later causes a data breach, or who violates a compliance law, or who goes bankrupt mid-contract,
Right.
It is the technical buyer who gets fired.
Wow, yeah. The liability is all on them.
Because of this intense personal liability, dealing with multiple technical buyers can feel like navigating a hostile minefield.
And in a complex sale, there are always multiple technical buyers. I mean, IT has to screen you, legal has to redline your contract, finance has to audit your payment terms.
Right. And the crucial distinction that you must burn into your brain is this. Technical buyers do not have the organizational authority to actually buy your product.
Right.
They cannot say yes, but they possess absolute, unyielding authority to block it. They can say no.
They can kill a multi-million-dollar deal with a single compliance checklist.
Absolutely.
And this dynamic creates a massive, very common trap that the text explicitly warns against. Mistaking a technical buyer for an economic buyer.
Oh, this happens constantly, and it is agonizing to watch.
How does it usually play out?
Well, here's how it usually goes. An economic buyer, let's say a highly paid, incredibly busy chief operating officer, wants to buy a new supply chain platform. But the CEO doesn't have the time to research 20 different vendors.
Obviously not.
So they delegate the initial research phase to a technical buyer, perhaps a mid-level procurement manager. The salesperson comes in, gets a meeting with his procurement manager, and the manager earnestly sits across the table and says, I am in charge of this evaluation process.
And the salesperson hears those words and their eyes just light up. They think, bingo, I am talking to the boss. I found the decision maker.
Right. The salesperson mistakenly elevates the technical buyer to the role of economic buyer in their mind. So what do? They start pitching the grand vision.
Big mistake.
They offer massive discounts. They pull out complex ROI spreadsheets. They waste all their strategic ammunition trying to close this person.
Oh, no.
Only to find out 3 weeks later that the technical buyer was simply gathering data to make a rubber stamp recommendation to the actual COO whom the salesperson hasn't even met yet. By pitching the wrong role, they lost control of the entire narrative.
If you want to visualize this, think of the technical buyer exactly like a bouncer at an exclusive nightclub.
I love this analogy.
Right. The bouncer does not own the club. The bouncer cannot comp your drinks. The bouncer cannot invite you to sit in the VIP section. And they certainly don't get to choose which DJ is playing. But if your ID is expired, or if you aren't wearing the dress code approved shoes, that bouncer can absolutely ruin your night and leave you standing on the cold sidewalk.
That is the perfect analogy.
Yes.
You cannot sweet-talk the bouncer into giving you VIP treatment because they literally do not possess that power.
Right.
If you stand there telling the bouncer how much money you plan to spend at the bar, they don't care. That's the economic buyer's concern. The bouncer only cares if your ID is valid.
So the practical application for you, listening, when you are sitting in a boardroom and you realize you are talking to a technical buyer, is to immediately shift your posture.
Yes, tone it down.
Treat them with deep respect, but understand their strict limits. Do not try to sell them the grand vision. Do not pitch them the 5-year ROI. Give them exactly what they need to do their job perfectly.
Give them the technical specifications, the security certificates, the legal boilerplate, the objective data they need to check their boxes.
Your goal with a technical buyer is not to inspire them. Your goal is to survive their screening process with zero friction, so that you are permitted to advance past the velvet rope and actually speak to the final decision makers inside the club.
Exactly. Survive and advance.
But navigating that transition, moving from the gatekeepers at the front door to the economic buyers in the VIP room, is incredibly difficult to do if you are flying blind. You don't know the layout of the club.
Which brings us to the fourth and arguably most vital role for your overall strategy, the coach.
Ah, the coach, the inside guide.
Right. This role is entirely unique among the 4 buying influences. The specific function of a coach is not to use the product or screen the product or fund the product.
What do they do then?
Their function is to actively guide you, the seller, to your sales objective. They provide you with the unique, hidden, and highly useful information about the other buyers that you could never possibly find on a corporate website or an org chart.
If we pull back and look at the big picture, there is a fundamental structural difference between the coach and the first 3 roles.
Yes.
The economic buyer, the user buyers, and the technical buyers already exist within the organization structure. They are sitting in their offices, doing their jobs, waiting to be found by you.
Right. You just have to identify them.
Exactly. A coach, however, does not exist naturally. A coach must be intentionally developed by the seller.
You have to recruit them. You don't just stumble upon a coach in the wild. You cultivate one over time. And the text lays out 3 incredibly strict criteria that an individual must meet to be considered a valid coach.
3 criteria.
This isn't a loose definition. If a person fails even one of these 3 criteria, they are not a coach, and relying on them as one will get you killed in the deal.
Let's walk through those 3 criteria step by step, because this is where complex deals are actually won or lost in the real world.
First, you must have credibility with them. This isn't about being friendly. It's about professional trust.
Like a track record.
Exactly. Usually this means they trust you based on past wins. You have delivered successful projects for them in the past, or you have a sterling reputation that they implicitly trust, so they know you are reliable.
Okay, so that's credibility with them. What's the second?
Second, they must have credibility with the buying organization itself. Their own colleagues, especially the economic buyer, must deeply trust and respect their opinion.
Got it. And the third criterion?
The third is the most crucial and the most often misunderstood. They must want you to succeed on this specific sale.
Not just in general.
No, not just in general because they like you, but on this exact proposal. They have to see a tangible personal win for themselves in your success.
Okay, I have to stop here and push back.
Go for it.
Because when I hear that, it sounds, well, Incredibly manipulative. Isn't this just a fancy corporate way of saying, I need to find a friendly informant who likes going to lunch with me? The guy in the office who loves chatting about the weather and gives me the inside scoop.
That is the most dangerous misconception in enterprise sales. An inside friend is completely useless to your strategic objective if they fail the criteria we just discussed.
How so?
Let's say you have a buddy in the marketing department who feeds you information. But what if everyone else in the office thinks your buddy is a nice guy, but a terrible, incompetent decision maker?
Right.
If that guy goes to the economic buyer and endorses your product, his lack of internal credibility actually poisons your deal. Furthermore, an inside friend typically only gives you what the text calls unique but useless information.
Give me an example of unique but useless. I love that phrase.
It's the classic gossip. Your buddy tells you, oh, just a heads up, the CEO is in a terrible mood today and he's wearing his lucky red tie. He loves the color red.
Right.
That is unique information. You couldn't find that on Google, but it is entirely useless for closing a multi-million-dollar complex sale. You aren't going to win a software contract because you complimented a red tie.
So what does a true coach provide then?
A true coach, someone with internal credibility who actively wants you to win, provides you with a literal map of the hidden decision-making process.
The real intel.
Yes. They tell you, listen, the economic buyer is projecting a terrible Q3, so she is focused entirely on reducing logistics costs right now. Don't pitch revenue growth, pitch cost reduction.
Oh, that's gold.
And by the way, the technical buyer in IT is going to grill you on server uptime during the presentation because they got burned by a vendor last year and he almost got fired.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is unique and highly useful information.
Exactly. A coach has the political capital internally to advocate for you and the specific desire to see your solution implemented because it helps them look good or it solves a massive operational headache they care about.
When you win, they win.
Precisely.
So the practical move here is to actively cultivate a coach for every single objective. Don't just hope a friendly face appears. Systematically test your contacts against those 3 criteria.
Do they trust me? Does the company trust them? Do they have a vested interest in this specific project succeeding?
And if they meet all 3, you have to be direct. You sit down with them and ask, how can we ensure that this solution happens? Who do I need to talk to next? And what are they afraid of? You use their inside knowledge to decode the organization's hidden dynamics.
And this leads us to a really fascinating nuance in the strategy, which is where the true masters of complex sales separate themselves from the amateurs.
Okay.
Once you have mapped out the matrix, once you know exactly who the economic buyer is, who the user buyers are, who the technical gatekeepers are, and you have recruited your coaches, you have to evaluate them. Because, as the text makes explicitly clear, not all buying influences exert equal weight in the room.
Right. This introduces the concept of degree of influence. This shatters the illusion of the corporate org chart even further.
Oh, completely.
Just because 2 people have the exact same title, let's say they are both senior technical buyers on the compliance committee, does not mean they carry the same weight when the doors are closed. Influence is a spectrum. It can be categorized as high, medium, or low.
And what's vital to understand is that influence is not permanently attached to a job title, nor is it evenly distributed.
Yeah.
The idea of the true one-person decision maker is a total myth in the modern corporate world.
Even the economic buyer.
Even the ultimate economic buyer is heavily swayed by the varying degrees of influence around them. Influence is determined by a complex matrix of factors.
What?
Like, what is the organizational impact of this specific proposal?
Yeah.
What is the individual's level of perceived expertise in this specific domain?
Right.
What is their physical location? Are they sitting at global headquarters next to the CEO, or are they dialing in from a satellite office in another time zone? And what is their personal priority regarding the project? Because of these variables, influence is highly volatile. It is fluid.
There's a scenario in the text that completely blew my mind regarding how fluid and counterintuitive influence can be. It involves a concept they call the lame duck anti-sponsor.
This is a brilliant example of why strategic analysis has to override your basic human instincts.
So, imagine you are a salesperson. You are proposing a massive company-wide inventory management system. You are mapping your roles, and you identify a key user buyer, the current inventory control manager.
Okay.
But there is a massive problem. This manager absolutely hates your proposal. He is negative in every meeting, he is hostile to your team, and he is actively trying to kill the deal.
Which is a nightmare.
Normally, as a human being and a salesperson, you see this as a massive, glaring red flag. Panic sets in. You think the deal is dead.
Naturally. Your instincts scream at you that you have a key user buyer actively blocking the path.
But because this particular salesperson had successfully cultivated a coach, the coach was able to reveal the hidden dynamic of the room.
The inside intel.
Exactly. The coach takes the salesperson aside and says, listen, don't worry about that inventory manager. Everyone in the executive suite completely dislikes him. He's been dragging his feet for years, and management is actually planning to let him go next quarter. He has absolutely zero influence left in this building.
He is a lame duck anti-sponsor. He occupies the role, but his degree of influence has plummeted to zero.
Right. But it gets even crazier. The salesperson realizes that because everyone in power hates this guy, the fact that he actively hates the new inventory system is actually a strategic strength.
Oh, that's wild.
If the universally disliked lame duck manager hates it, the rest of the company is psychologically more likely to love it just to spite him.
Yep.
His negative rating becomes a massive plus for the seller. His degree of influence is zero, but his negative polarity actually helps push the sale through.
It is a stunning example of why you cannot rely on surface-level assumptions or basic organizational charts. You have to map the specific degree of influence for every single player. But this reality raises a very important, very practical question that I see professionals struggle with constantly in the field.
Which is?
Resource allocation. Time is money, right?
Always.
If you do your mapping perfectly, and you identify someone as having a low degree of influence on this specific sale, let's say it's a junior compliance officer or a mid-level shift supervisor, shouldn't you just safely ignore them? I mean, why waste your limited time and energy on the low-influence players when you could be focusing all your firepower on the heavy hitters?
It's the classic 80-20 rule, right? Focus your time on the 20% of people who wield 80% of the power to save time and close faster.
And the text sternly, unequivocally warns against applying that logic here.
Really?
Ignoring a low-influence player is a strategic error of the highest order. Why? Because the extreme volatility we just discussed. A player with a low degree of influence today can become a high-influence player tomorrow morning due to a sudden corporate reorganization, a sudden shift in project priorities, or an unforeseen market crisis.
The corporate musical chair.
Exactly. Let's say you ignored that junior compliance officer today because you mapped them as low influence. You didn't return their emails, you brushed off their questions in the meeting.
You treated them like they didn't matter.
Right. And then next week, their boss unexpectedly quits, and that junior officer is suddenly promoted to acting director of compliance.
Oh, you were dead in the water.
You are. You bred resentment. You made them feel unimportant. And now they have the power to enact buyer's revenge. They will find a reason to kill your deal, not because the product is bad, but because you disrespected them when you thought they didn't matter.
So you have to chart out the degree of influence to prioritize where you spend the majority of your energy, but you absolutely must cover all your bases.
Every single one.
If you are sitting in that boardroom, you have to ensure that even the low-influence buyers feel heard and respected. You don't have to spend 10 hours customizing a pitch for them, but you must acknowledge their role, answer their questions thoroughly, and treat them as vital parts of the process.
It minimizes the systemic risk of unexpected roadblocks when the corporate landscape inevitably shifts beneath your feet.
It is about comprehensive systemic risk management. You are not just selling a product. You are orchestrating a complex, fragile system of human egos, organizational needs, and shifting authority.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, let's step back and pull all of this together. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground navigating the complexities of the new strategic selling.
We really have.
We started with the fundamental realization that surviving the complex sale requires completely abandoning the organizational chart. You cannot rely on titles. You must focus entirely on functional roles.
We identify the economic buyer, the single point of authority who holds the gold, focuses exclusively on the bottom line ROI, and whose role floats up and down the corporate ladder based on the perceived risk of your proposal.
Right. And we explored the user buyers, the daily operators, whose subjective buy-in is absolutely required to avoid internal sabotage and ensure the long-term success of the implementation.
We decoded the technical buyers, the heavily scrutinized gatekeepers who can't say yes but can absolutely say no, and we discussed how to survive their objective screening process without mistaking them for the ultimate decision makers.
And we unpacked the critical active necessity of cultivating a coach, an inside guide who has internal credibility, genuinely wants you to win, and can provide the unique, highly useful map to the organization's true dynamics.
And finally, we layered on the volatile concept of degree of influence, recognizing that influence is fluid. The one-person decision is a complete myth, and every single player, no matter how seemingly insignificant, must be strategically covered to prevent future disaster when the power dynamics shift.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this right now? The ultimate insight, the true soul of this chapter, is that selling in a complex B2B environment isn't about pushing a product onto a monolithic, faceless company.
No, it's not.
A company doesn't buy anything. People do. Selling is about orchestrating a multi-layered relationship with distinct, complex, often insecure human beings. It is about understanding that structure and empathy must go hand in hand.
That is the perfect synthesis of the framework. Knowing a buyer's specific role, knowing their daily fears, their metrics for success, and their degree of influence tells you exactly how to empathize with them and genuinely serve their best interests.
Right.
When you map these roles accurately, you aren't just manipulating a corporate system. You are learning how to create a highly calibrated, genuine win-win for every single person involved in that decision.
It changes your entire paradigm. You move away from asking, how do I beat this customer and extract a commission, to asking, how do I guide this complex, chaotic group of individuals to a solution that helps all of us succeed?
And when you make that shift, those sure things stop falling apart at the last minute.
They absolutely do. But mapping the organization and identifying the players is really only the first half of the battle.
Oh, definitely. It's just the beginning.
Exactly. Because now that you know exactly who the players are and you've perfectly mapped out the gold holders, the gatekeepers, the users, and your coaches, how do you know if they're actually psychologically ready to change the status quo?
That's the million-dollar question.
Next time, we'll dive into the hidden psychology of corporate change and why approaching the perfect buyer with the perfect product at the exact wrong moment could still cost you the entire deal. Because finding the person whose name is on the door is great, but it only matters if you know exactly when they're willing to open the checkbook. Catch you on the next deep dive. What if the exact moment you feel the most confident about a major deal or a big project is actually the exact moment you're in the most danger?
Honestly, it's a super unsettling thought, right?
Yeah.
Especially for anyone who's ever managed a high-stakes project or a massive sales cycle.
Yeah, totally.
Because, we're biologically and psychologically conditioned to seek certainty. We crave that feeling of being completely locked in.
Right, that moment where everything aligns and you can just finally exhale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in complex, multivariable situations, whether that's, selling enterprise software or negotiating a merger, or even just pitching a new initiative to your own executive board, that absolute certainty is almost always an illusion.
Wow.
I mean, in fact, it's usually a symptom of a massive blind spot.
Right, you think you got it all figured out, you're mentally spending the bonus check, or you're already planning the launch party for the new department you just pitched, and then bam, you get completely blindsided by some tiny detail you didn't even know existed. So in today's deep dive into the source material, we are exploring key element 2, red flags and leverage from strength. In just a bit, you're going to learn how actively hunting for flaws in your own strategy is actually the ultimate secret to winning. By mastering how to spot these red flags and applying your true strengths as mechanical leverage, you'll gain a foolproof system for navigating complex business deals without ever being blindsided.
And what makes this approach so, radically different is how it forces you to completely abandon that traditional, frankly, manipulative style of pitching.
The old school approach, yeah.
Right. If you look at the old school way, it was heavily focused on momentum. The goal was just to push forward relentlessly and overwhelm the other side with slick talk, focus entirely on the positives, and aggressively ignore or minimize any signs of trouble.
Like a battlefield mentality.
Exactly like a battlefield. But this methodology requires the exact opposite mindset. The goal here isn't to trick anyone into a signature. It's to rigorously manage a joint venture.
A joint venture?
Yeah. You have to look at a deal not as a conquest, but as a mutual project where both sides need to achieve their specific self-interested goals. And, you just cannot manage a mutual project if you're actively ignoring the structural cracks in the foundation.
Okay, well, I actually want to push back on this right out of the gate.
Sure.
Because theoretically, that sounds great, right? Manage the joint venture. But let's talk about the psychological reality of being in the trenches.
Okay.
If you've spent 6 months working on a massive account, and your boss is breathing down your neck for a forecast, and you suddenly realize your grand strategy is actually full of holes? Human nature is to panic.
Oh, absolutely.
Or to just hide it, right. So how do the best professionals actually react when they realize their strategy's full of holes?
They experience a completely counterintuitive emotion, which is relief.
Relief. Wait, really?
Relief. And this brings us to the core philosophy of the red flag. In this specific framework, a red flag isn't just a minor annoyance. It's not a negative thing that you try to sweep under the rug before your manager sees it.
Right.
It is a vital, non-negotiable early warning signal. It explicitly tells you that there is an area of missing information or a critical area of uncertainty that is actively threatening your ultimate goal, what we'll refer to as your single sales objective.
But feeling relief when you find out your deal might be falling apart, I mean, that requires a massive rewiring of how most business professionals operate. Most people want to live in the delusion that everything is fine.
It absolutely requires rewiring, and it's why so many people struggle to implement this at first, There's this incredible anecdote in the source material that perfectly captures this shift in mindset.
Oh, yeah, the one with the young sales rep?
Yeah, exactly. So picture this energetic, highly successful young sales rep. He's sitting in a strategic planning workshop, and he's been asked to review his absolute best, most secure account.
The one he's banking his entire quarter on.
Right, his sure thing. And he's instructed to use this methodology, which involves actually placing physical little red stickers on a worksheet every single time he identifies an unknown variable or an unverified assumption in his account strategy.
I can already imagine the creeping dread as he starts actually analyzing the deal instead of just, hyping it up.
Well, that's the thing. He's working quietly, and after a while, he suddenly throws his pencil down on the table.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't look defeated.
He doesn't panic.
No, he doesn't look panicked at all. He has this expression of odd elation. He looks at his worksheet, which is now just completely covered in a sea of tiny red stickers, and he announces to the room, "I just discovered something. I don't even have a prospect."
That is just wild. He just vaporized his own pipeline and he's happy about it. Why would anyone be thrilled to realize they don't actually have a deal?
Because of the timeline. Think about it. Discovering you don't actually have a prospect before you waste another 6 months of your life flying out to see them, buying them dinners, and forecasting revenue that will never materialize. That is a massive strategic victory.
So it's time saved.
It's time saved. It's resources saved. It prevents you from living in what the text brilliantly describes as the euphoria-panic continuum.
Okay, the euphoria-panic continuum. Let's really unpack that because I think everyone listening has either witnessed this or lived it firsthand. It's this wild, exhausting pendulum swing.
Oh, yeah.
On one end, you have professionals blindly hoping things are fine. They're living in total euphoria, telling their managers the deal is 99% closed, right up until the moment the client goes completely dark, the deal crashes, and they plunge straight into absolute hair-on-fire panic.
And that continuum is the default state for anyone operating without a strategic framework.
Yeah.
When you're euphoric, you are completely out of touch with reality. You're selectively ignoring the subtle warning signs, the unreturned emails, the delayed meetings, the vague answers about budget, because it just feels so much better to believe the deal is safe.
Right. The euphoria is a defense mechanism against the stress of uncertainty.
Exactly. But the problem is,
Yeah.
reality always catches up. And when you inevitably hit the panic phase, you're just as out of touch with reality. You are paralyzed by the sudden collapse of your expectations, reacting entirely emotionally instead of logically.
It's exactly like the check engine light on your dashboard.
Yeah.
Let's say you're driving down the highway, the car feels fine, the radio is playing, you're making great time. That is the euphoria.
Sure.
Then the little orange light pops on. Most people, and I will admit I have been completely guilty of this, have an immediate emotional reaction of annoyance.
Oh, absolutely.
Some people will literally put a piece of black tape over it because they just do not want to deal with the mechanic. They want to maintain the illusion that the car is fine.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. But a professional mechanic or a highly strategic driver pulls the car over immediately. They aren't annoyed. They're genuinely thrilled the sensor worked and caught the problem before the engine block literally cracked in half at 80 miles an hour.
That is the perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
The amateur resents the warning light for ruining their pleasant drive. But the professional values the light because it gives them the opportunity to save the vehicle.
Yeah.
And the practical takeaway here for you as you are listening to this and thinking about your own current projects is that you have to actively train yourself to feel that relief.
During the relief.
Right. If you sit down to analyze a major project, a sales deal, or a partnership negotiation, and you do not find any red flags, you haven't done a good analysis.
Wow.
You're missing something. A strategic analysis without red flags is an analysis without opportunities. It means you're sitting squarely in the euphoria zone, entirely vulnerable to blind spots.
Okay, so we really need to completely shift our relationship with bad news. Finding the flaw is the opportunity. But if we're actively hunting for these flaws, what exactly are we looking for? Because, I mean, in any complex business scenario, there are a million little things that could go wrong. Are all flaws created equal?
No, they are not. While some red flags are going to be very subtle and highly specific to your particular industry or your specific product, there are 5 specific scenarios that are so universally dangerous across all types of business that they should trigger an immediate automatic danger response.
The 5 automatic red flags. Let's go through these because this is where the theory actually hits the pavement. What is the first one?
Well, the first 2 are actually inextricably linked. They are missing information and uncertainty.
Okay, so missing information is fairly obvious, right? If I'm trying to sell a massive logistics software package to a global shipping company and I literally do not know who signs the final contract, that's a glaring hole. I am missing a fundamental piece of the puzzle.
Right.
But the second one, uncertainty, that
Right.
feels a lot more subjective. Let's play out a scenario. What if I've been talking to my main contact for 3 months? I am 90% convinced I know their exact budget cycle, and I'm pretty sure I know what their implementation timeline is based on our last conversation.
Okay.
Does that level of confidence still warrant a red flag? Because, I mean, you can rarely be 100% certain about anything in business until the ink is dry.
It absolutely warrants a red flag. In fact, that exact scenario, being 90% convinced, is when you need the red flag the most.
Really? Even at 90%?
Yes, because it's vital to understand the psychological distinction being made here between knowing you like information and being pretty sure you have it.
Right.
If you explicitly know you don't have the budget information, you're fully aware of your blind spot. You'll actively work to find the answer. But if you're 90% sure, it means you're 10% blind, yet you're acting, planning, and forecasting as if you have 20/20 vision.
So the danger isn't just the missing 10%. The danger is the false confidence you build on top of the 90%.
Exactly. That 10% assumption is where deals go to die. We naturally fill in the blanks with our own optimistic assumptions just to keep the momentum going.
We want it to be true.
Right. We want the deal to close by Q3, so we interpret a vague comment from the client as solid confirmation of a Q3 timeline. The rule of thumb here is brutal but necessary. If you're only pretty sure or 90% convinced, or if you find yourself saying, I assume they will, you must reach for the red stickers.
Wow.
You have to treat your own assumptions as active threats to your success until they are verified as concrete facts.
That is a tough pill to swallow because it means constantly second-guessing your own read on a situation. But it makes sense. If 90% sure means 10% blind, you have to treat that 10% like a landmine.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are relentlessly verifying our information. What happens when the information is clear, but we run into a structural problem with the people involved? That leads us to the third automatic red flag.
Yes. The third automatic red flag is any uncontacted buying influence.
Uncontacted buying influence.
This is the massive danger of the uncovered base. In any complex sale or project approval, there are always multiple people whose input, technical sign-off, or financial approval is required.
Right. It's rarely just one person writing a check nowadays.
Exactly. And a classic, almost cliche trap for professionals is to only talk to the people in the organization who already like them, or the people they've known the longest.
Oh, the path of least resistance.
Yes.
It's so much easier to operate in the comfort zone. Like, let's say you're selling networking hardware. It is a joy to call up your buddy Jim in the IT department. Jim loves your product. Jim understands the specs. Jim takes you out to lunch.
We all love Jim.
Right. But it is incredibly uncomfortable to cold call the skeptical VP of finance, whom you've never met, who thinks your product is way too expensive, and who just doesn't care about IT specs. So you just rely on Jim.
And that reliance on Jim is a critical failure in strategy. There's a great baseball analogy for this in the source material. Imagine fielding a baseball team, but you decide you don't need a shortstop because you really like your pitcher and your outfielders.
Right.
Sure, your pitcher might throw a great game. The outfield might catch a few fly balls. You might even win the game through sheer luck. but you are operating under extreme, entirely unnecessary uncertainty. Every single time a ball is hit up the middle of the infield, you're holding your breath, praying it doesn't roll through the gap.
Yeah, you're exposed.
You cannot manage a predictable, successful project if you intentionally leave entire bases uncovered.
Because Jim, despite all his enthusiasm, is not the VP of Finance. And when the final decision is made behind closed doors, Jim might not actually have the political capital to push your deal through.
Precisely. If you leave a base uncovered, you're leaving your success entirely up to chance. And hope is not a corporate strategy.
That's a great line. Hope is not a strategy.
Right. Every single person who has a say in the final decision must be identified, contacted, and evaluated by you. If there is a key player, a compliance officer, a financial gatekeeper, a technical evaluator, whom nobody on your team has spoken to directly, that is a massive glowing red flag.
Yeah.
You cannot assume your friendly contact is going to do your job for you and sell the rest of the committee.
Okay, so we have missing information, uncertainty, and uncontacted buying influences. What is the fourth hazard?
The fourth automatic red flag is highly specific but incredibly common, and that is buying influences who are new to the job.
New faces. Let's explore why this is so dangerous, because I know there's a very specific real-world story from the text that illustrates exactly how a new face can destroy a sure thing.
It's a fantastic cautionary tale about complacency. There was a large established freight carrier competing against a much smaller but highly strategic sales rep for a massive multi-million-dollar logistics account. The large freight carrier had been working the account for months. They had deep, long-standing relationships with all the senior management. They were deep in the euphoria zone, completely convinced they had the deal locked up. But right before the final decision, the buying company suddenly brought in a new outside consultant to help evaluate the final bids.
And how did the large freight carrier react to this new person?
They completely ignored her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they felt so comfortable with their existing relationships with the old guard that they viewed the new consultant as essentially irrelevant. They figured their established ties with the CEO and the VP of operations would easily override whatever this new consultant had to say.
Arrogance.
Total arrogance. But the strategic rep, the underdog in this scenario, saw that new face and immediately recognized it as an automatic red flag.
He didn't see her as irrelevant. He saw her as an unpredictable variable.
Exactly.
So what did he do differently? Did he just try to, butter her up?
No, he didn't just schmooze her. He strategically evaluated her. He proactively approached her, recognized her mandate, and worked to understand exactly how she was perceiving the competing proposals.
He did the work.
He did the work. He realized that as a new consultant, she had to prove her value to the company that had just hired her. He made sure her specific analytical needs and concerns were directly addressed in his proposal, effectively turning her into an ally.
And the outcome?
The result. The large, complacent freight carrier lost a deal they thought was 100% guaranteed, and the strategic rep walked away with the business.
That is just fascinating. If we dig into the psychology of organizational dynamics there, it reveals a fundamental truth. A new person in a company has absolutely no allegiance to you.
None.
They have no history with your product. They don't care about the great golf outing you had with the CEO 3 years ago. Often, they've been specifically brought in with a mandate to shake things up, to cut costs, or to prove their own value by finding flaws in the status quo.
Exactly. The very presence of a new person introduces change into the ecosystem.
Right.
And change is the absolute enemy of a static strategy. New faces must be treated as active threats to your objective until you proactively determine their role and their perception of your proposal.
Right.
If you ignore them because you're comfortable with your existing champions, you are just walking blindfolded into a trap.
Which brings us perfectly to the fifth and final automatic red flag, because it is also entirely about organizational change. And this one might be the trickiest of all to spot. Reorganization.
Reorganization is incredibly disruptive. But we really have to look beyond the obvious headline-making mergers, acquisitions, or massive layoffs.
The public stuff.
Right. When a company announces a major restructuring in the press, everyone knows the game has changed. The far more dangerous scenario is what we call the stealth reorganization.
Stealth reorganization. I mean, that sounds incredibly Machiavellian. What does a stealth reorg actually look like on the ground? Because if they aren't announcing it, how do you even know it's happening?
Well, a stealth reorganization is when the external facade of the company remains exactly the same. The job titles on the doors haven't changed. The org chart on the company intranet looks identical to last month. But behind closed doors, the internal reporting structures, the departmental budgets, and the true avenues of authority have secretly shifted.
Let me see if I can picture this. Let's say my main contact is the director of marketing. I've been selling to her for years. Her title is still director of marketing. But what you're saying is, maybe last Friday, the CEO quietly mandated that all marketing spend over $5,000 now has to be co-signed by the CFO.
Precisely. Or perhaps her specific product line just had its budget quietly slashed for the upcoming quarter to fund a different initiative entirely.
Oh, wow.
Or she now reports to a newly formed steering committee instead of directly to the VP. On the surface, everything looks like business as usual.
Right. Nothing has changed visibly.
Exactly. And if you ask her how things are going, human nature dictates she will likely say everything is great, because admitting she just lost budget or autonomy is politically embarrassing.
Yeah.
But the reality of how decisions are made and who has the power to release funds has completely morphed.
So you're dealing with a ghost structure. You are pitching to the ghost of her former authority. That is terrifying. How on earth are you supposed to spot an automatic red flag if the client is actively hiding it from you?
You have to look for the behavioral shifts, the subtle discrepancies that break the established pattern.
Like what?
If your contact usually responds to emails within an hour, and suddenly it takes 3 days, if a meeting that has been on the calendar for a month is suddenly pushed back with a vague excuse about internal alignment.
Internal alignment, the classic corporate excuse.
Right. Or if the tone of the conversations shifts from when we implement this to if we get this approved. These are the micro signals of a stealth reorganization. Whenever a buying organization shifts gears in any way, public or stealth, the power dynamics change. You have to assume your previous understanding of the corporate landscape is completely obsolete until you can independently verify the new reality.
Okay, this is a perfect moment to pause and give you, the listener, a practical challenge. Think about the most important project, deal, or internal pitch you are working on right this exact second. I want you to mentally audit it against these 5 criteria.
Is there any missing information?
Is there uncertainty? Are you only 90% sure about a critical detail like budget, timeline, or technical requirement?
Is there an uncontacted buying influence? Is there someone who has a say in this who you have been avoiding?
Is there a new face in the room who wasn't there when you started?
Has the target organization recently reorganized, or are you sensing the subtle delays of a stealth reorganization? If you hit yes on even one of those questions, you need to immediately place a mental red sticker on your project.
And honestly, if you found one, congratulations, you haven't failed. You have successfully diagnosed a vulnerability before it could kill your objective.
Exactly. The mechanic caught the engine light.
Right. But as crucial as this diagnostic phase is, spotting the hazards is only the first half of the equation. We can't just identify red flags and then sit back and hope they resolve themselves. We have to actively, systematically eliminate them. And to do that, we have to deploy our strengths.
And here is where we hit a massive paradigm shift. Because when we say the word strength, 99% of people immediately revert to their marketing brochure.
Oh, yeah.
They think of their product's best features. Our software processes data the fastest in the industry. Our manufacturing tolerances are the tightest. Our customer service is available 24/7. But if I'm understanding this methodology correctly, almost everyone fundamentally misunderstands what a strategic strength actually is.
It is perhaps the most critical distinction in this entire framework. The traditional business mindset relies heavily on features and benefits.
Right, the classic feature dump.
Yeah, you memorize a list of all the universally great, objectively impressive things about your product, your service, or your team, and you just unleash that list on the buyer, hoping they're suitably dazzled. But in complex strategic situations, a true strength is absolutely not an inherent quality of your product.
Wait, let me make sure I am hearing you right. You are saying that even if my company spent $50 million developing a proprietary state-of-the-art feature that no one else in the world has, that feature might not actually be a strength.
That is exactly what I'm saying. A feature, no matter how much R&D money went into it, is only a strategic strength if it meets 3 very strict, unforgiving criteria within the specific context of the specific buyer you are talking to right now.
Wow.
If it misses even one of these criteria, it is just noise. It might be a neat fact, but it is not a lever you can use to win the deal.
Okay, let's rigorously test this. What are these 3 strict criteria that magically transform a basic feature into a true strategic strength?
Criterion number 1, it must be a verifiable area of differentiation. It has to clearly separate you from the available competition.
That seems straightforward, but I imagine it gets muddy in highly commoditized industries.
Hmm.
Like if I'm selling cloud storage and my servers have 99.9% uptime, I might think that is a strength. But if Amazon, Google, and Microsoft also offer 99.9% uptime, it's no longer a differentiator.
Exactly. In that scenario, 99.9% uptime is not a strength. It's just the baseline requirement to even be allowed to play the game.
Right, table stakes.
If everyone has it, it doesn't give you an edge. But there's a crucial second half to this first criterion. It must differentiate you in a way that matters to the customer.
So if I have a unique feature, let's say my cloud servers are painted a proprietary shade of neon green.
Huh?
That is absolutely a differentiator. No one else has green servers. But the customer doesn't care. It doesn't solve a business problem for them. So it fails the test.
Precisely. Nobody cares that your minivan has a built-in espresso machine if their primary burning need is third-row seating for their 5 children. A differentiator that doesn't solve a recognized problem is useless. Which leads us to criterion number 2. It must improve your position.
How do we tangibly measure that?
Yeah.
Because improves your position sounds a bit theoretical.
It means it must practically, visibly increase your chances of success. It must give you actual leverage in the negotiation or the evaluation process. If you highlight a feature and the client says, oh, that's nice, but it doesn't compel them to take the next step, agree to a pilot program, or introduce you to the CEO, it hasn't improved your position.
That hasn't moved the needle.
It hasn't moved you closer to the close.
So it has to be a catalyst for forward momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is the third and final criterion?
Criteria number 3. It must be relevant to the current objective. It has to apply specifically to the single sales objective you're working on right now with this specific client in their current economic reality at this exact moment in time.
I love this because it entirely strips the ego out of a pitch. It forces you to stop admiring your own product. Let me try an extended analogy here to make sure I've got this locked down. Let's say I manufacture high-end extreme weather down jackets. They are engineered for Himalayan expeditions.
Okay, very niche.
Right. The fact that my coat is the absolute warmest, most incredibly insulated jacket in the entire global industry is a massive objective feature. It is a clear differentiator from a standard winter coat. It improves my position if I'm talking to a mountaineer.
Definitely.
But let's say my current single sales objective is trying to secure a massive retail distribution contract with a clothing chain based in the Caribbean.
A very different context.
Exactly. The buyer in the Bahamas, who is looking for lightweight rain shells for tourists, absolutely does not care about sub-zero thermal ratings. In the context of that specific deal in that specific boardroom, my world-class warmth is completely irrelevant.
Right.
It fails criterion 3 spectacularly. Therefore, in this meeting, my warmth is not a strength. In fact, if I spend 20 minutes pitching the thermal rating, it might become a red flag because the buyer will realize I don't understand their market at all.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the trap of the features and benefits mindset. You cannot just walk into a room, vomit a list of your product's universally impressive features onto the table and expect applause.
Right.
All those bells and whistles, all those state-of-the-art tech upgrades your engineering team is so proud of are completely useless if they do not align with the buyer's subjective, immediate perception of value. This raises a highly confrontational question for anyone pitching a project, an idea, or a product. Are you actually selling to their specific verified need, or are you just paying lip service to their need while stubbornly pushing your favorite features?
Wow.
You have to sell to the need.
Stop listing your product's universal features.
Yeah.
That is a massive practical takeaway for the listener. I challenge you to look at your standard pitch deck today. Go through it slide by slide and ruthlessly cross out everything that doesn't specifically move the needle for the immediate objective of the person you're presenting it to.
That's a great exercise.
If a bullet point doesn't meet all 3 of these criteria differentiation that matters, position improvement and relevance to the current objective, do not dare call it a strength.
Because if you rely on fake strengths, if you lean on features the buyer doesn't actually value, you will be completely impotent when you reach the final, most crucial step of this entire methodology.
Which is bringing the 2 halves of the equation together. Identifying a red flag is great diagnostic work.
Yeah.
Rigorously defining a true strength gives you your tools. But the actual magic, the execution, happens when we actively smash those 2 concepts together. How do we take a validated strength and weaponize it to fix a red flag.
This brings us to the core mechanical action of the entire framework, a concept called leverage from strength.
Leverage from strength.
Yes. This is the systematic, intentional method of using your validated strengths to completely eliminate or significantly reduce your red flags. And to truly understand how this works mechanically, how to apply the leverage, we need to analyze a very classic, very painful corporate scenario.
Yes, let's walk through this scenario because it is a dilemma literally everyone in business has faced in some form. You're trying to close a major software deal. You have a primary contact inside the company, a user buyer. Let's call her Jill.
Okay, Jill.
Jill is the production manager on the factory floor. She is the one who will actually be using your software every day. And Jill absolutely loves your proposal. She understands the interface. She sees how it will save her team time. She is completely sold. You have a massive validated strength in Jill's support.
Excellent. You have a clear strength, but what is the obstacle?
The obstacle is the economic buyer. This is the VP of Finance who sits on the top floor, who actually controls the budget, and who has the exclusive authority to sign the check and release the funds.
The gatekeeper.
Right. And the VP utterly refuses to take your calls. He is heavily insulated by gatekeepers. He is incredibly busy. He doesn't know who you are. And he basically views all software vendors as an annoyance. The isolated, unreachable economic buyer is a massive, glowing, automatic red flag.
This is the classic standoff. You have a powerful strength Jill's enthusiastic support. And you have a lethal red flag, the VP's unreachability. How do you resolve the tension between the two?
Right.
If we analyze human behavior in sales and project management, there are 3 common reactions to this exact scenario. And the first reaction is what most aggressive old-school professionals default to: hammering away.
Hammering away. This is the brute force approach. You identify the red flag, the VP won't talk to you, and you decide to just smash through it.
Exactly.
You keep calling the VP directly. You leave progressively more desperate voicemails. You send those passive-aggressive, just bubbling this up to the top of your inbox emails. Maybe you even try to physically ambush him in the lobby of his office building. You try to force your way through the obstacle.
And if we look at the psychological fallout of hammering away, the result is almost universally disastrous.
It never works.
First, you deeply annoy the VP, who now actively dislikes you and views you as a pest rather than a strategic partner. But far worse is the collateral damage. By aggressively going over Jill's head and harassing her boss, you make Jill look terrible politically.
Oh, yeah. You burn Jill.
You violate her trust. She might get reprimanded for letting a vendor harass the executive suite. In your attempt to destroy the red flag, you have actively destroyed your only strength. You alienate your friendly user buyer.
Okay, so brute force is a spectacular failure. It ruins the relationship. That leads us to the second common reaction, which is the exact opposite of hammering away: running around.
Running around is the path of ultimate passivity. This is the euphoric trap we discussed earlier.
Circling back to euphoria.
Exactly. This is where you encounter the red flag of the unreachable VP, you cross your fingers, you back off entirely, and you just hope that Jill will somehow sell the VP for you. You assume her enthusiasm on the factory floor is enough to carry the day in the boardroom.
Jill loves it, so we're good. I've said those exact words before, and it almost always ends in tears.
Always.
Why? Because you completely lose control of the narrative. Jill is a brilliant production manager, but she is not a professional salesperson, and she definitely isn't an expert in your product's financial ROI. When she inevitably goes into a closed-door budget meeting with the VP is going to ask hard, cynical financial questions.
What is the payback period?
Right. How does this integrate with our legacy ERP system? Why are they charging this much for implementation?
And Jill won't know the answers. She will stumble, the VP will dismiss the project as poorly researched, and the deal quietly dies behind closed doors. You never even get a chance to defend yourself or save the deal because you abdicated your responsibility to Jill.
So hammering away destroys your strength, and running around ignores your red flag entirely.
Yes. This is why the third reaction is the only viable strategic choice: leverage from strength.
Leverage from strength. Let's break down the mechanics of this. How does this actually play out in real life with Jill and the VP? How do I use Jill without throwing her to the wolves, and how do I get to the VP without hammering on his door?
Instead of ignoring Jill or leaving her to fight alone in the boardroom, you use your established credibility with her, your validated strength, to transition her from just a user buyer into an active coach.
A coach.
Yes. You sit down with Jill and you strategize together on exactly how to approach the VP. You don't hand her a brochure and ask her to sell it for you. You do the hard work with her. You ask, Jill, what are the VP's top 3 priorities this quarter? Is he trying to cut overtime costs? Is he trying to increase throughput?
You figure out the VP's language.
Exactly. You figure out how the software purchase specifically increases her department's productivity in a way that directly impacts the VP's financial goals. And then you use Jill's internal credibility to secure a joint meeting.
Oh, a joint meeting.
Right. You tell Jill, let's go to him together. You present the operational need, and I will be there to answer the heavy financial and technical questions. You are leveraging your strong, secure position with Jill to build a temporary bridge across the gap to the VP.
This instantly reminds me of the famous Archimedes quote from the text. Give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world.
Yes, exactly.
It's a literal physics analogy applied to corporate politics. If you try to walk up and lift a massive multi-ton boulder, the unreachable VP with your bare hands, you will break your back. That is hammering away. You will fail.
But if you construct a mechanical advantage...
Yes. If you take a long, sturdy lever and you place it on a solid, immovable fulcrum, the fulcrum being your established strength, your solid relationship with Jill, you can apply indirect downward pressure. You achieve with structural mechanical advantage what direct brute force never could. You lift the boulder.
That is the absolute soul of this strategy, applying indirect pressure via a fulcrum. It requires patience, deep analytical thought, and a highly nuanced understanding of the human dynamics at play within the target organization.
Because the VP won't take a call from you, but he will take a meeting with Jill.
Exactly. The VP will absolutely not take a cold call from a software vendor, but he will take a meeting with his own trusted production manager about a plan to increase factory output by 15%. You intelligently insert yourself into that internal priority. You use the existing organizational gravity to your advantage instead of fighting against it.
This is so profoundly effective because it removes the desperation from the sales process, which gives us the ultimate strategic rule of thumb for this entire deep dive. If you take nothing else away from this, write this on a Post-it note and stick it to the bottom of your monitor. Every single action you take, every email you send, every meeting you schedule in your business planning must actively accomplish one of 3 things.
It must capitalize on a validated strength.
It must eliminate or reduce a known red flag. Or, number 3, in the absolute best case scenario, like the joint meeting with Jill and the VP, it must do both simultaneously.
That's the holy grail, doing both.
Right. If an action you are planning does not do one of those 3 things, you are just spinning your wheels. You are wasting your time and confusing your strategy.
What makes integrating these concepts so incredibly powerful? Constantly hunting for red flags instead of hiding from them, rigorously defining true strengths instead of just listing features, and using mechanical leverage to bridge the gaps, is that it provides you with a living roadmap that constantly self-corrects.
It takes the guesswork out.
It completely demystifies the business process. It takes the mystery out of why deals stall or why projects get rejected. More importantly, it takes luck entirely out of the equation. You are no longer hoping the stars align or relying on the euphoria of a good meeting. You are building an engineering system that forces forward progress.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together into one final cohesive picture. Winning complex business. Whether you're selling multi-million-dollar software, pitching a massive internal restructuring project to your executive board, or trying to negotiate a delicate partnership, is not about blind optimism.
No, it's not.
It is not about aggressive, loud, charismatic pitching. And it is certainly not about just sitting back and having the objectively best product or the warmest down jacket in the room.
It is about rigorous, brutally honest self-assessment. It requires the humility to look for the cracks in your own foundation.
Exactly. It's about putting the car over the literal second the check engine light comes on, and actually being glad you found the problem before the engine exploded.
Right.
By actively, ruthlessly hunting for red flags in your own plans and then applying the mechanical advantage of your true validated strengths, you transform your vulnerabilities into a predictable step-by-step roadmap. You permanently move out of the exhausting euphoria-panic continuum, and you step into a stable, highly managed process that reliably leads to a win-win outcome for both you and the buyer.
It is a methodology that deeply respects the complexity and the psychological realities of the modern business landscape, while giving you the exact, tangible tools to master it.
But mastering your own strategy raises an entirely new, incredibly complex challenge. Now that you know how to flag the internal dangers and leverage your own strengths,
Hmm.
how do you handle a room full of decision makers who all perceive reality in completely different ways?
That's the real test.
Right. What do you do when one person at the table is desperate for immediate change, while the person sitting right next to them feels threatened by it and is perfectly happy with the status quo? That psychological minefield is exactly what we'll uncover in our next deep dives when we explore the 4 distinct response modes. Until then, remember, your own confidence can be your biggest trap. Keep hunting for those red flags, keep stress testing your assumptions, and we'll see you next time.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.